Welcome to Thorin's YouTube channel. Andrew, shut the fuck up, you piece of shit. Welcome to Thorin's YouTube channel. It's going to be a wild ride. GG, motherfuckers.
Okay, this is going to be episode 56 of Counterpoints. Usual host, co-host, all that McGobbins. All right, Moses, how you doing, mate?
I'm doing good. I'm really feeling lively after that beautiful introduction. I'm feeling ready for this episode.
Yeah, I saw you doing the hosting over at the Blast Pro series there.
Yeah, stepped in big, had a lot of attention, a lot of eyeballs. Yeah. You know,
so that's weird that sort of in some ways, because remember, if you know, Blast Pro series in Copenhagen last year had Sembler, of course, as the host. So it's unusual that you sort of filling in for trying to fill Sembler's shoes, you know.
In multiple different ways.
Yes, exactly. No, here's the thing, Moses. I actually do feel that, obviously, you know, it was business and political reasons as to why people were at the different events. But I actually feel like I'm glad you went to that event, mate, because on the one hand, at that one, you could just enjoy a pretty good final, like Astralis very good. If you'd have been in New York, that would have tormented you, my friend. Like, think about that. Like, Team Liquid's doing a best of 5 final. Fucking hell, best of 5. They've got a pretty good map pool. Who are they playing? Mouse Spots, the shit one with Snacks. Oh, this is easy. Yeah, I'm loving this. They're up 2-1, and in the third map, it's 13-5. I was like, sound, well, I think we know which way this is going. Yep. And Liquid. Just like...
Listen, I wasn't there, but I tuned in on the airplane on that flight home just to the scorebot, and I was like, oh, they're up 13-7 on their starting map. Like, oh, great, this is awesome. I'll order a drink.
No, that was the fourth map, but yeah.
And then I check in 30 minutes later, and it's like, fuck me. As soon as they lost that map, I just knew they were done. That was rough. But yeah, I'm glad I wasn't there. Istanbul was fun, though. Hosting the desk was good. We actually had some... I'm surprised the final in Istanbul was actually that good.
It shouldn't have been. Like, funnily enough, that should have been a 2-0. I saw on the second map that Astralis was up, like, massive. Device was going off. I was like, oh, close this fucking HLTV.org score pit. Then I came back later, and it was like, they won 16-14 in the third. Like, what's going on? Is this rigged or something? What's going on?
That was wild. It was a really, really good game. So that was cool. Istanbul was fun. It was good. It was good, obviously, to have a Blast event that had 2 days. Which was, you know, that was...
Yes, what a novelty. I think they should probably try that format going forwards. That whole, like, put everything on 1 day. It's not really enough time, is it?
No, it was a good change. It was a good change of pace.
Okay, so our guests for this episode, we've got in the bottom right-hand corner, it's my man dusT, who I will again reiterate for the millionth time, because I want to get this message out there, is dusT never said you're les noobs. He didn't do that. That was someone else. I don't know why he gets the blame for that. He didn't even do it. In fact, all he did was say, I think Smiths is a good player, and hold up a fucking Kappa sign. That's it. People make out like you just went on some like 20-minute rant. You were like, and by the way, fuck Smiths and the clicky claims, and G2 is a record label. It's like, he wasn't doing any of that shit. The only problem is, dusT, this is the thing I have to tell you, mate. You did do that, like, right after there was a Reddit thread, like a day before, that was like, we're all going a bit hard on Smiths, you know, he is bad, but let's just give him a break. And that was exactly the timing where, like, you must not have seen that thread, and you were just like, here's my time to get my burning on Smiths. And then, like, the whole community was like, what the fuck? We all agreed.
Man. Oh, no.
What can you do?
The best part about that that no one ever pays attention to is the fact that you did the Conor McGregor line.
No one got that reference.
You did like the Southern accent attempt at an Irish accent. And
it goes beautiful. From the bottom of me heart. It's like sound. To be honest, that was the most offensive thing you did, dusT. But you actually skated on that one because no one knows what an Irish accent sounds like. So yeah, to be honest, that's the one that should have gotten you international hatred. But
crucified.
We're trying to recover from all that. You know, put that behind us now. I've told you. I think
only 2 years old, of course. But
listen, mate.
Long road.
Don't worry how many years there is after an incident. These things don't go away, homie. You put it so I'm not going to be at the next major drama, boy. Like, let's be real. You know, I've had people, I'll say this now because I don't give a fuck. I've had high-level people from Polish and Brazilian events going, just come along to the event, it'll be fine. And I'm like, first of all, I do have access to the internet and a site called Watch People Die. I don't think I'll be coming to any of these events. Sound. You enjoy that, I'll enjoy watching that. And if I see you on there, I'll say, hey, I know that guy. I wonder what's going to happen to him as this fucking guy runs up to his car at a park and like. Anyway, on that note, on the note of danger entering other countries due to our statements. Alan, on the last episode, we set you the difficult task of breaking down tier 2 North American teams you've never seen play. So we're gonna be a bit kinder on this one. We're gonna give you, it's the big dogs. We're gonna have one of those episodes where it's sort of like state of the scene, because we've had the major, we've had the player break. We haven't really had many fucking roster moves, I have to say. It was one of the weird ones in that sense because the major came right after a player break. So what's good is we've got all these established teams, but if you notice, I thought this is a good topic to start with. The player break has basically, it seems like everyone except Astralis and Team Liquid got fucked by the player break. Like, nobody looks the same coming out of it. So I thought a good team to start with was the team that looked so hot going into the player break, which is Na'Vi. Team that obviously had beaten Astralis. They won ESL 1 Cologne. They came into the major. They made the final of the major. This is a team that, if you'd have actually gone back to earlier in the year when they had the other major and they got that like really easy run to semis because they got Quantum Bellator Fire, and that was when Electronic wasn't at all like a star player, it was just the simple show. They even had a dog shit map pool that was when like they could only play Inferno. Ironically, they actually are terrible at Inferno now, but they still pick it. Like, if you just said back then, you'll win tournaments, you'll be like tons of top 4s, you'll be in the fucking final of the major, that would sound amazing. But what do you make of this major run for Na'Vi and where Na'Vi's at, Alan? What do you think?
So, if we just look at like the player break onwards, for most teams, I do actually discount Stockholm because it was just straight after the player break, and I do really think for Na'Vi that...
Didn't help that North won it, of course.
Yeah.
That does make it seem like some Twilight Zone
like,
shit,
for
doesn't
Na'Vi,
it?
I do think their individuals really weren't there, to be honest. I don't think Electronic or Simple really played up to their regular standards, but coming into the major, up to the final, they looked really great, in my opinion. I thought Simple, and especially Electronic, was in great form, and they really were playing good Counter-Strike throughout the tournament, but they just came into that final. Astralis were just on a totally different planet. I don't think anybody could have beaten them in that final. And then, 2 days later, they fly out to New York. It was barely any time at all, and they just fell totally flat in New York. And I do think it was because of how close it was to the major was the main reason that they fell off so hard. But if you want to talk more about like Na'Vi in terms of style,
do you have any confidence in them rebounding from?
Yeah,
yes,
that's a pretty good one. I think because some people think they're fucked.
I think they will. I think they will pan out as probably the third best team.
Okay.
I think Electronic and Simple are just too good, and they do have quite a lot of depth to how they play. But within that, I don't think they'll ever have the consistency of the top teams because they have their reliance on the individuals is too much. They can't, in my opinion, on the T side especially, they can't fall back to standard rounds. They can't play. Their execution is nowhere near as good as, say, a Liquid or Astralis. And they buy so aggressively that when it goes wrong, the whole game can just be lost. And I think in the major final, you saw elements of that. So, yeah, that's kind of my overview on Na'Vi.
Okay. Jump in, everyone else. What do you think of the current Na'Vi?
I mean, there's certainly a lot of good things about them. I mean, obviously, Electronic has really come into his own. I think that the catalyst for that was getting him more engaged in early round situations. Like, he's not just some lurker anymore like he used to be. He's, in fact, swapped a lot of positions. They've kind of moved other people to kind of take his roles and let him get more engaged. And I think that's really helped their entry power because before it was either Simple's Op or Edward. And, well, Edward wasn't going to get you much. So I think that they have Electronic more engaged is great. I also just think that, you know, compared to previous Zeus teams, specifically previous Na'Vi iterations with Zeus, I feel like this team has a lot more ability to play faster paced Counter-Strike. And you did see that a little bit towards the end of Gambit with Zeus, but I'm not sure if this is like Zeus progressing as an in-game leader and involving with the meta, or if it's a situation where the personnel kind of forces this out of him to do faster shot calling. But they're definitely a very explosive team. And, you know, a lot of credit gets given to Simple and Electronic, and rightly so. They're some of the best players in the world right now. But Flamey's a pretty solid, reliable third for them. And I often think that he doesn't get mentioned. And I'm a little bit concerned about what his future is, though, because there was all those rumors going around after the major. So you have to kind of wonder what the standing is with him with the team going forward. But, I mean, look, like, they have an incredible amount of talent. They have one of the deeper map pools in the scene right now. Granted, they've had a couple of maps slip off a little bit. But as much praise as teams like Astralis get and Liquid gets for their their map pools. I think Navi's map pool's better than Liquid, to be honest with you. But I do think Navi's regressing while Liquid is building. So I wonder how that pattern will play out over time. But yeah, I mean, I think that these losses to Gambit at New York are kind of outlier losses, and I would expect them to do better going forward than that.
Yeah, I mean, New York's obviously a throwaway. My problem with Na'Vi is like I tend to go with my gut with Na'Vi, and it's even when they're winning at the major, it was kind of weird because you still don't have a lot of confidence in Na'Vi. They're still the team that you don't feel like you can actually pick, even when they continue winning, because it seems like they're just like they seem so disorganized. And I don't know how they win some of these games, but a lot of it does come down to Simple Electronic. Obviously, those two players keep them in the top 5 on their own. But the question beyond that is just like, what can you do? You do need Flamey to be a third player. You do need Edward to step up in at least one map of a best of 3 series if they're going to beat anyone in kind of a deep run of a tournament. I just don't see. I don't see a way that these guys can beat Astralis now. I know they did beat them in what I think that was Cologne when they beat them. But I mean, I still am going to take someone like Liquid, Astralis over Na'Vi. I think third is probably where they're at now. I could see them getting overtaken as well. By an MIBR, by a FaZe if they ever get back and figure things out. I can see those teams kind of jumping ahead just because I never feel confident in teams that rely so much on especially just 2 individuals to play insane. I was trying to find it just now. I saw some stat recently where it was like Navi's only won 3.
It's 3 maps of the last 100 if Simple's under a 1.0 rating.
Yeah, that's so mental. Like you can't exist like that. You can't be a top team in that way because people are going to have bad games, and while they happen less to Simple, that's still just too much reliance. Because if you watch them play, they rely on him a lot of times to close rounds, and then he also has to like open rounds as well.
Yes.
And it's just like once you have a player who's so important in those 2 aspects, it's not always going to go to plan. And especially now when you have this tactical era of CS coming in, where defenses are very good at putting 2 players at point of contact, very good at getting aggressive to be able to find an opening pick. Every once in a while, Simple's just going to straight up get traded, and then you have to recover from a situation.
Yeah, I mean, and just to tie into that really quickly, for a team that's like number 3 in the world, I think we're kind of putting them at, they have some of the worst statistics for utility usage in Counter-Strike when it comes to like flash assist or utility damage with grenades. Like, they don't have that element that other teams have. Like, that combined with the stat you just gave about Simple really does paint the picture that yeah, they can do some basic strategy. Yeah, they have some explosive players, but they don't have as deep of a playbook as like an Astralis or a Liquid. And those are the 2 things they struggle against the most. And it's no mystery why. They just stylistically cannot match up against those guys very well.
Like as you say on the utility angle, because obviously that's been a big thing in the last few months with the rise of not just Astralis, but I think that's definitely contributed to people like Big having any relevance whatsoever. I think that's probably the part that's maybe underrated about, or overvalued about Na'Vi rather, is that they're really not a good utility team. Like actually, if you look at how they use it, because Zeus still plays, aside from what Alan said, like they do play some fast hits sometimes, but the old Zeus style of play, because it's just where you just super slow, take map control, like poise yourself around both bomb sites. Basically, you yourself haven't decided which one you're going to. You see if you can like sniff out a rotation, and then you go to the site on like 30 seconds. The problem is, that old style, which is basically how Counter-Strike was played, like I'd say like two years ago, early 2016 maybe, that basically uses all your utility before you ever actually get to some gunfights. Like you're using a smoke to get up the top of mid on Inferno. You're using a flash to come round a corner. It's like you've used most utility long before then. Like I thought one of the maddest details was when Astralis started getting all these insane utility damage numbers. People were looking into it like, but what are they doing differently? And the funny thing is, the actual conclusion most people came to is exactly the same conclusion as when they started first tracking those like grenade stats. And famously, it was Flusher that was number 1. And it was the same exact conclusion, which is it's nothing crazy. All they do is they wait to see someone before they throw a grenade in their direction. Like that sounds like a joke now because it seems so obvious. But in the past, you know, you use a grenade just to check if someone could be there. You use a grenade to stop someone pushing up to a spot. Like in a bizarre fashion, like they have changed the meta in that sense. But people like Na'Vi, I do not think are in that realm. And the big problem is, this is one of the reasons why Zeus is like, he reminds me of MSL in as much as like, on the one hand, his style is clearly one of the strengths that gets you to the whatever level you're at. But then also like his refusal to ever change that style is why you're also like never going to go beyond that point, I feel like, because he's someone where I bet if you sat him down, he wouldn't agree with anything we just said about like the new style and the new meta. He'd be like, no, the way we're doing it's correct, and this is like the right way to play. I know in his mind as well, it's not even just like simple and electronic that I carry in him. So definitely has a different conception of the game. And I'm definitely with you on the angle as well. Like, if it requires these level of performances from simple and electronic in both tournaments, where basically they have to be like top 5 players in the tournament, eventually that's just not going to be the case. I mean, it's bad enough thinking that you can just have simple be like a god forever just to get into any semis. You can't have 2 players play at like world beater fashion every game just to have a chance to win. Because remember, they don't blow people away. This isn't a team that like 16-6s their opponent or whatever. They tend to win pretty close games generally and have to grind them out. So this seems like a team where if one of those players takes a dive, it doesn't even have to be much. Let's say like a 10% dive in form. I think they would be like, 7th best team in the world. And I don't think anything else would have to change. I wouldn't be blaming Zeus or they don't know how to play this map. It's too easy for this team to go down, basically. I can't see how there's any higher ceiling.
The biggest problem that Navi's going to have is if they continue to disappoint and underachieve while Simple and Electronic are playing like this, how long do Simple and Electronic keep faith in that team? And then, like, when do they start mentally checking out? When does a player just say, you know what, fuck this, it's not working, like, how much more do I have to do? And then that's going to break up the entire nature. And we know this has been a conversation of every Navi lineup and the emotional aspect of it, but even with this one specifically, they've already just barely survived Simple and Flamey leaving. Yes. And that is like what reignited and motivated them moving forward, and they got insanely better after that. But how many times can you actually reasonably expect to be able to do that? We'll see at their upcoming tournaments, but I think they're kind of they're kind of teetering a little bit on the edge at the moment for me.
And if you look at that, obviously the game that was in everyone's mind before the major final was their epic win over Astralis at Cologne. So people I wanted to believe that, they were going to play like that and it would be an insane final. But if you're actually honest, that's one of those finals. This is how mad Astralis is this year. Like, when they lost the Sydney final, we all wanted to go like, does this tie into the old narrative? Did they like choke when it was really close? Like, to be fair, that's about the closest anyone's ever lost 0-3. Like, it was an amazing game. Then you look at Cologne. Again, the maps that they lost, super close. The map they won, they dominated. Like, you actually look, it's only by slivers Astralis ever loses. And in that Cologne final, semi rather, that especially is one where do not think that means like Na'Vi, it can beat Astralis. Because what it took for them to win was the decider was Inferno, which if you go and look, a Na'Vi is ass on. They have lost to most teams they played, except Astralis out of the last like 7 or 8 times. It's a map that really dropped off for them. Then you've got to add in that on CT side, they literally were just doing gamble stacks all day long. And it was like, it must have been the perfect storm because Astralis was going into the gamble stacks again and again. Well, if anyone's ever played a fucking Inferno Pog and you just try a pure blind gamble stack, good luck, because what you always find is you start looking at the clock and you go, 40 seconds, they still haven't come at bomb, has been played. It's like, sound, well, that's fucking brilliant, isn't it? It's like, the odds that they come to your site every time is so unlikely. And then you've got to add in, like, that was one where fucking Electronic went super ham. Like, not just good, but he was like really legit in that series. So, for me, unfortunately, the worst part is Na'Vi already looks capped out, and that's with Astralis there. If Team Liquid actually is going to continue being really good, Team Liquid's already beaten them a bunch of times, so now they won't even be number 2. Now they could, as he was saying, they could be number 3. This could be like the end of them winning trophies, realistically, I think.
Well, by the way, Astralis closed that gap of their weakness at that event so quickly. They got punished by Navi's buys, as you guys mentioned earlier, as how aggressively Navi likes to force buy, and Astralis lost to that and figured it out so much, and they became better at it in the major.
What was brilliant was, by the major, they were the best force by team. Which is like, sound, so you're just going to do that as well then, are you? I know, Navi, why have you done that, you dickheads? You just ruined the whole major. It's like, that was one of the only things we had against them. It's like, Sam, we'll just, I guess we better just work on that as well. Should we work on Cash as well? And then Zonic goes, come on, man, give people a chance. It's unfair, isn't it? It's actually unfair.
Oh. Yeah, they're Astralis is just so far ahead of everyone. So I think Navi's got to figure something out. I think they've kind of in a lot of ways it seems like they have gone a little bit away from, I feel, from like Zeus's classic style just a little bit. And I think you had to, and I think that's what allows Electronic to kind of really thrive. But then you also miss towards the end of the rounds when you need to execute onto a bomb site and when you've already lost 2 or 3 players because of the more loose play style, then it just becomes kind of a really uncomfortable situation for him. So the big part, obviously, I think, is they just need to at some point they're going to have to figure out how much longer this lineup can go on if they're going to keep being disappointing, and what's okay for them. Are they going to be the team who's going to fight to get Simple his first major and Electronic his first major, or are they going to be a team who's fine with placing top forward at pretty much every single event and then having an exceptional run and maybe winning one or taking a trophy like they did at Cologne? Do you want to be a major winner, or do you want to just win a couple of events throughout the year?
Just like jumping in on what Jason was saying about how Na'Vi play T-side, I think the difference between now and how Na'Vi used to look historically is that Simple and Electronic are both given a lot of space to play make early round. Like they're both and they're both incredibly smart players. They do not get credit for that from people enough because they're both very smart. You have to understand how people default and stuff, and how they play map control to actually pull off these aggressive plays. But I think a lot of kind of the explosiveness they have early round on T side and how they can work picks early come from those two, and that's why when they're having issues they just fall back to a really standard game, and then they just don't have the class of a Liquid or Astralis or historically a FaZe. So yeah, that ties in a lot to the utility usage as well, because even that was Liquid's big mark for me when I was watching them, when I started realizing they were going to become a very, very good team on the world scale, is slowly but surely you started to see them adding things in, and they became like a very, very good team with utility well before they were able to kind of challenge at pretty much every single event. You could start seeing their thought process of when an attack was underway, when they're on the defense calling for a pop flash turning from a teammates and knowing it's coming, and you don't get that same sense out of Na'Vi, and I think that utility is what a lot of teams, as we've noticed, or I think Duncan, you said it with Big and with Liquid and with Astralis, that seems to be a jumping point for a lot of teams to be able to skip a couple steps. Maybe they're actually the 10th best team, but if their utility is better than the 3 teams ahead of them, you can steal those. You can almost jump up and perform like the 6th or 5th best. So I think that utility that a lot of teams are focusing on at the moment, when they're taking a cue from teams like Astralis, that's allowing them to look much, much better in game and at least do a better job passing the eye test.
Why don't we talk about Astralis then? Because obviously so much of an RV story, like almost every top team we're going to talk about, is how did they do against Astralis? What is Astralis better at? Because of Astralis has been so dominant. So, dusT, what do you think of the current Astralis team? Because one of the things I think is getting interesting for me is, what's bizarre is because they were so dominant early on, it feels like everyone was just trying to hit on them, when are they going to drop off? Was this loss here proof that they're not actually the best team? It goes the opposite way for me now. I'm starting to look and go, is this the best team to ever play Counter-Strike? It feels like we're in that territory now.
I think there's one team still ahead of them. I think that late 2014 to late 2015 Fnatic's still ahead. That team went to 27 LAN events and only placed outside of the top 4 twice. So it's 25 events with at least a semifinals appearance. They made 18 finals and won a ton of them, including 2 majors. So I think that they're still a little bit off of that one. And then it just depends on how much weight you want to put on NiP's dominance early in CSGO. But when you filter for the context of quality of opposition, the metagame, the size of the map pool, things like that, I think that Astralis probably does edge that out. And I think that they just recently beat out that LG lineup that had Fnax and Taco, because that team also had a really good run of form. So I think Astralis has surpassed them. So I have them at number 2 if you're going to go greatest of all time. But they still have room more to play, right?
Yes.
No one's showing us signs to challenge them yet. So they very easily could do that. They win another major, they get a couple more trophies. They're probably right there. The numbers for this team are literally unreal. They've played the last 9 events. They made the finals 8 of those 9 times. That's pretty crazy right there. Not only that, but their map pool is insane. Besides that Fnatic team I already mentioned, that's probably the deepest map pool you've seen in CSGO history. They own the 2nd longest map winning streak of all time, 20-0 on Nuke. So only NiP has them beat on that on Nuke from the very, very early days of Counter-Strike. And then on Inferno, a map that's very hard to be the best team in the world in nowadays, they've won 21 of their last 25 games. So, and then you just keep going down the map pool, 8-1 on dusT, 7-2 on Train. They just don't really have a weak point other than Cash, and they even still have a positive win rate on that. Name another team that has a positive win rate on all 7 maps in the pool. I don't think you can find that in an offline environment.
Tyloo Online now. 2016.
In the offline environment.
Yeah, obviously.
Yeah, that and just a couple of more numbers real quick. They lead in almost every category statistically as far as round win percentage or utility usage, particularly the damage with utility has been the big talking point about them. Some of their HE grenade stacks are super nuts, very gimmicky and very hard to read, and so people take a lot of damage from it. Not only that, but I mean, I know we're not going to sit here and say that all 5 of their players are the best 5 players in the world or something like that. But just from a numerical standpoint, all 5 of them are in the top 15 for like rating and things like that. So when you're getting that level of contribution on all 5 players in your team, no one else is getting that. And then from an eye test, just to quickly end this, they're the most complete team I've ever seen. When it comes to like the strategical element of Counter-Strike, they literally can do it all. Like their defaults are so well grounded. Everyone has a set position. They know exactly how to do it together. And then they throw in one of the deepest playbooks as far as executes go. And the one thing they do that I don't see anyone else do as well is cadence. The way they set up rounds early in the half, like they throw these same smokes here and there every single round at the same exact spot. They condition their opponent with those to kind of say, okay, like they're taking mid control, they're doing this. And then, 8 rounds deep into the half, you see those same smokes. And, all of a sudden 5 people are running down your throat at the A bomb site or something. So,
like anyone who thinks, that like, just anti-strat them, it's like, that's literally what their style is designed to prevent. Like, if you try and anti-strat them, it's probably going to get you fucked, basically.
They'll do the same window and cat smoke on Mirage 15 rounds in a row on their T side and then do something different every single round with those smokes. And then you just get frustrated because you can't figure out how many people are mid. Do they have one guy mid just sitting there? Or are they taking full mid control with 3 players? You have no idea. They are, like I said, just the most complete team in every sense from an eye test.
When you were bringing up the map stats, which again is like stats porn, basically. If you like trivia, like their map pool is just unbelievable because you can literally go down and you get to like the 4th and 5th best map, and that would literally be the best map of any other team in the world, like for stats and like opponents beaten. And probably the maddest thing, I think the most underrated aspect of this Astralis team is that if you want to talk about dominance, the amount of times they win the opponent's map pick is fucking mind-blowing. Because I'll give you an example, okay? I will say that I've always picked that out as a quality of, like, the greatest teams of all time. Because the key thing for me, though, is, like, if you're the greatest teams, you're going to win a lot more series if you just don't get into the risky waters of being in that 3rd map where, anything can happen, etc. But to be honest, most teams didn't 2-0 people in history. Like, okay, Nip did at the beginning because they won every game. But usually the reason why it was so cool for, like, Fnatic, for example, to be able to win the opponent's map pick is that meant they could overcome you winning theirs. They could overcome the upset and still win. Astralis just legitimately, in most series this year, just win their map pick and then just win yours as well. And that's the end of the series. And obviously because of the map pool, every single team, this is so insane, every team that plays Astralis is like, right, which one of the maps that they're really good at do we have to pick as our map? Like, I've never seen that happen in history, There was teams that, like you say, the Fnatic team had a very deep map pool, but you could still, like, pick, like their 5th or 6th best map. If you were envious, you could pick Cash and maybe have a chance to beat them on it, You actually have to go into the match now knowing that whatever you pick, they basically like playing. I mean, people hoped, for example, because of the final of DreamHack, obviously MIBR hoped that maybe dusT 2's a weakness. Well, I think they found out that that's not the case, unfortunately, So, right. I can't blame them, though. It's a mad pick your poison scenario, isn't it?
But also to add to that number really quick, you're talking about like how hard it is to beat Astralis. Of the 24 maps they've lost, only 3 times were they denied double digits. So even when you beat them, it takes like a Herculean effort to put them on the ground. Like they're always in games, even when
that was my joke, by the way, that I've been using in my videos and on By the Numbers. Is like obviously the problem because when we're going to talk about Team Liquid, obviously there's going to be a discussion about closing out the game, winning in finals, overcoming choking. Well, the joke with Astralis is even with Glaive, like they definitely toned it down a lot, but they still did lose a lot of close series, and they would get into a lot of 3rd maps, and they would just fall short. Otherwise, they could have won more titles. So the joke is, they didn't really get the sports psychologist and just overcome all choking issues. They can still lose if they get to like a 14-14 game. But like my joke is like, it's like they sat down and they were like, right, what's our biggest problem? Well, I mean, we're really sick, we've got pretty good players, we've got all the roles, got pretty good map pool. Yeah, but what's really holding us back? Problem is, if we get into a really close game, we can lose. Right, how about this? Let's just not get into any close games. Let's just win 16-7 every time, and there'll be no problem. And then they go, yep, we're all agreed on that, yeah? It's like one of those fucking committees, like, have you sent out the email, Linda? Yeah, I remember that's the notes for today. Don't ever let games get to 14-14, and probably be fine at that point in time. Like, that's not a solution, is it? Like, can't just go, that's not actually a fix to the problem. That's just being the best, isn't it?
I think the key to Astralis being this good is they've changed the way that everyone's going to have to think about the game, and that hasn't caught up across the scene. Like a lot of the theory they have behind how they play and the decisions they make, they are the best team at not making. That's kind of a weird way to phrase it, but they just don't make a lot of mistakes. Like normally when you see a team that's going to I didn't mute myself, did I? That's going to, play around and they're up like 4-1 in player count or something like that. If it's a 4-on-1 round, they won't lose any of those 4 players. It's not like one player is going to get aggressive and go for some kind of a crazy kill and, risk dying. They play such a smart economic game. They play the odds in every scenario. There are rounds that they could theoretically go for, like if it's like a 3-on-2 or a 3-on-3, and they're just like, you know what? We don't really have a great position to even challenge for this. It's not a high percentage. Let's just save these 3 weapons, especially if their economy's right on the edge. So instead of getting fully reset, they're going to play with 3 rifles and a UMP at a deagle or something like that. And those weapons are obviously still dangerous in those scenarios. So they do such a good job of that, and no other team is that disciplined in those scenarios. And I think that's a big reason, because the economy has such a big impact, and obviously a lot of teams, I don't even think teams fully realize how much money they're risking when they just have one player who's like, oh, yes, you know what? It's a 4-on-1. No matter what happens, we're going to win this round. I'm just going to rush this guy and try and get a kill. And then he loses $6,000 worth of equipment and has to rebuy in the next round. And that might not have consequences in the immediate short term of the game, but 2 rounds down the road, when you need to drop an AWP, when you need to drop an M4 for somebody, you don't have the cash anymore. So it's just a bunch of small decisions in that regard that no other team is really putting in the work, and it all comes down to their practice and preparation for these events. And that's why Astralis is going to be like, I don't even care to talk about Astralis in game anymore. There's too many good things to mention almost, but the fact that they prepared this well, it's just, they're like, if teams don't start doing this behind the scenes, they're never going to catch up. That's why it's so funny hearing all these roster rumors, because I just start laughing my ass off, because it's like the more teams change their rosters, the farther Astralis gets ahead without even doing anything. You're not going to beat Astralis by catching up on skill. You have to be able to improve and step up in the different areas in which Astralis has revolutionized, and no other team is doing that at the moment. So
the funny thing is, what you just said there obviously is what a lot of, by the way, not just fans, but a lot of pro teams are thinking exactly that. That's why the Mouse Spots of the world, fucking FaZe Clan, they're all thinking in their brain the same old like mentality of, right, you've got to get another player who's really good, or we've got to get like a better star player here. I think that's one of the aspects that's very underrated. Whenever you get a dominant team, one of the questions you have to ask isn't about the team, it's about who is their peer group. Like, what types of teams are they beating? And the world that Astralis came into was the world in which everyone had decided in 2017, you make teams like FaZe Clan, like SK, you just stack really good players, and you get as many good players as you can. And at the time, everyone was into that world of like, you force spy all the time because you've got all the star players, you play loose because you've got star players, like, you let people have a lot of individual room, so you can't make the reins too tight of like what we're going to do on a certain strat and be coordinated. So the first thing is, first of all, their style is the amazing counter to that exact style of play. And then on top of it, you can't be FaZe Clan and go, right, let's just copy what they're doing. It's like, you would never be able to pull it off. Like, you've built your team the wrong way. That would be like having a fucking NFL team where your entire core are like all wide receivers, and now you're playing the team that has the best running game. Like, it's not gonna, you can't do what they do, your team isn't set up that way. And quite frankly, I don't know any big level team that's trying to go the Astralis way, except Team Liquid, who obviously luckily had a team that was built that way anyway, because the teams that are trying to go tactical, as I kind of alluded to earlier, are the ones that aren't that good, actually. It is the big clans, it is the G2s, there aren't, in fact, even the new Vitality lineup, that's a skill-based lineup. That's a bunch of like fraggers who are going to presumably play pretty loose and try and win the way that people did 1 year ago, 2 years ago. So unless someone's going to revolutionize that aspect of the game, I don't see anyone like catching up that angle. What do you think here, Alan? Because obviously you're a guy who admires this aspect of Astralis, right?
Definitely. I think for Astralis, I just think basically every aspect of their game is just so complete, and they've obviously thought about everything. They're just, from the very minutiae of how players play each of their like CT spots, all the way up to how they're like calling T sides. It's obvious to me that they've sat around and they've actually talked about these things. I think the really interesting kind of storyline with Astralis is when they came from end of 2017, when they didn't have Device, and then into the Magis lineup. And if I had to guess, I think back in 2017 they played standard rounds really well. Their execution was still incredible. Sure. But then they played this period where they didn't have Device, and they were forced to use stand-ins, and they were forced to play a bit more aggressive, a bit more loose, play throw more like contact plays, have to pre more aggressive as well. And I think it kind of opened Glave's eyes to actually, you can throw in these rounds to a half, you can throw in contact plays, you can catch people off guard if you call it right. And that's what they've added to their game now, and that's for me what kind of separates them with a team like Liquid. I don't think Liquid is anywhere near as good at calling more aggressive rounds, throwing spanners in the work, because that is what Astralis is incredible at. At any time, they might just... So if you take, I don't know, T-side Nuke, for example, at any time, Glaive might just vent dive or something, or they might go for an aggressive ramp play. And that's kind of... when you're conditioning like an opponent to how to playing slow and execute heavy, just throwing in those rounds out of nowhere, I catch them totally off guard. And that's definitely an area that I think Astralis is incredible at. Other things they're incredible at is they deny information like no team I've ever seen before. They do small little things. So I've just mentioned it earlier. Something they do really well is they'll run a simple execute at the start of a half. So if you go back to Nuke, they do a fast inner execute with a smoke main. They will run in Squeak. And throughout the half, they'll just keep throwing that smoke and keep throwing those nades, and the CTs have to react. They drop loads of nades, and it's just this kind of dynamic of keeping your opponents on their toes. It's impossible to read them, and it's impossible to anti-strat them because they have so many rounds that look the same and they're just going to the other side. Or
that's why that MSL comment when they won DreamHack Stockholm was hilarious. Because again, if you want is there a blueprint to beating Astralis? He was like, I watched 150 demos. It's like, that's not again like a fucking solution, is it? Like, we can't all just enter the fucking hyperbolic MSL time chamber, just like come out of it like Doctor Strange. Like, I figured out the one way we can win with me AWPing. Like that, it's not a fucking solution, is it? It's a one-off.
Yeah, a hilarious quote in there as well. He say that they'd watched loads of Astralis Nuke demos and they'd heavily anti-stratted them. Then Astralis just come in and absolutely floor them because it doesn't matter how.
No, but while it was happening, MSL was going. I remember that one. That was round 4 of demo 17. Yeah, they pushed their shit in as well. Yeah, cool.
Not an efficient use of time.
I know exactly.
Yeah, I mean. Also for Astralis, I think they do actually change the style of how they play it between games a bit, especially in the semi against Liquid. Going back to Nuke, love my Nuke.
It's the easiest one of the Astralis, isn't it?
They're by far the best team on Nuke. They're like 2 or 3 times better than anyone else. It's really that much. They just got so much more aggressive. They didn't do the rounds they'd normally run, and Liquid couldn't handle it. So they're just. Yeah, I think complete really is the best word for Astralis. I find it incredibly difficult to floor them.
By the way, you do know that the worst thing about Astralis' dominance and them being 22-0 or whatever it is on Nuke is that we're now never going to get Nuke fixed or removed, because I know the way the Valve devs work, and this is no joke. I have heard this line of logic and reasoning many times from the Valve devs. It goes like this. They'll just pick one data point and go so if you tell them, for example, Nuke's not a very good map, a lot of teams have they'll go, what do you mean? Astralis is having a great time on T-side. It's like, please no, that's the exception. Have you ever heard the saying, the exception that proves the rule? All you need to know is Device actually said this on Twitter to me. When there was that famous PGL Krakow jump bug that Big was exploiting all the time, and all the players obviously went to the Valve devs and they were like, you got to fix this, hot fix it or ban it or something, The Valve dev just goes, but if everyone can use it, it's fair. It's like, are you for real? What does that even mean? What the fuck is that? Imagine just looking this motherfucker dead in his eyes when he says that, is this a joke? What? No, all I'd ask him is I'd just say, who hurt you? Why do you have to do this to us? What did I ever do to you, man? It's benefit. Just the most cancel logic ever. Please. Can we get someone else in here? Can I speak to your manager? What do you mean? I am Gabe Newell. Sound, right? I'm out. Anyway, dusT, you had a point you were going to come in on there, yeah?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're in a situation now with Counter-Strike where it feels like the era of specialists is kind of gone. You still have some teams that are more aggressive or some teams that are more default-oriented or execute-oriented. But I feel like a lot of people are trying to move towards having a more complete game. That is, if you want to be the best team in the world, you kind of have to be able to do a little bit of everything. You can't get away with just being really good at one thing and expecting to be the best team in the world. And I think the problem is that Astralis is literally good at all versions of CS. It's this crazy amount. they're one of the teams that have the best established roles for every single player, and every single player within their respective role might be the best in the world at it, or at least one of the best in the world at it, right? Like, I mean, I think that dupree's the best pure entry rifler right now in the world. I like maybe Sonny or somebody like that else can kind of compete with him. Obviously, big playmakers like a Simple or something can do really good openings, but when you think of pure entries, like dupreE, I think is definitely number one right now. Then you have the Vice, who may not be the most skilled opera in the sense of like how flashy he is, or like how insane the shots he hits is. But I am willing to bet that if you were like to break out the heat maps, he must be the most mobile opera in CSGO right now, particularly on CT sides, which means he's an absolute nuisance to deal with whenever you're trying to play an offense against Astralis and you have no idea where Device's op is going to be, because not only does he change from round to round where his starting location is, but then after he gets a pick, he's somewhere else on the map within probably about 5 seconds. And what makes that so great is it's not just him. It's the fact that the rest of the team can react to him moving so quickly and seamlessly that no gaps are created. So where you can kind of exploit him while he's trying to move, like you just can't do it. And then you have Glaive, fantastic in-game leader, probably one of the best fragging in-game leaders in the world. Maze just has gone a little bit under the radar, I think, because the other players are so good. I think he's really good at what he does as an anchor on CT side and how he plays his T sides out. So, and then you have Xyp9x, who's super clutch and a great support player, probably the best support in the game. So it's like Alan was saying earlier, where's the weak point at? It's hard to find one. Like I mean, not only are they best at default and team play, but they literally innovate while they're being the best at these other things. So while other teams might be trying to grind the fundamentals and trying to make sure that, hey, we got to make sure our base is sustained, like we have a great foundation, a good default, good roles, all that good stuff. They have all that and they're innovating in the game. So good fucking luck. Like,
no, at this point in time, like, people need to start using like fucking Cold War era psyop tactics. Like, you have to like befriend Device and start asking them stuff like, you ever wonder what we're doing with our lives? It's just a fucking video game, man. Like, what are we men? Are we becoming men? What are we, we're just boys playing. Like, you got to like actually go deep into the fucking psyche on this shit. Like, start just spreading rumors that people's girlfriends are cheating. Just basically, this is the only way we're going to break them. You've got to just break them as people. There's people behind the monitors.
Blast rock and roll at his hotel room outside the window.
Yeah, you do the old like Celtics Lakers type shit where, like the heating's just too hot in the room and then the wrong food's coming up constantly. Oh, what's that peanut allergy? Well, wonder what's going to be secretly hidden in this sauce.
Well, I remember I talked to Freiberg about this at Stockholm, and he was just like, listen, no one's going to catch up to Astralis. Here's the real challenge that teams have. It's not necessarily about finding a weakness in Astralis' game. It's about the fact, Freiberg just said something very, very intelligent. He was just saying, no one's going to catch up to Astralis by copying what they're doing, by like studying them and like incorporating what they do into their game. You do have to be able to get one step ahead, and you do have to look at your team and what they like to do. And it doesn't mean innovate in terms of things that have never been done before, we've never seen, but you need to actually be able to look at your players and say, what is the skill set of this player? What does he like to do on this side of the map? Is there a way to work with it? Is there a way we can craft a play for this guy and maybe one other player to do it? Because I'm kind of a two-man push, two-man aggression. Maybe they like to take it a different way than we've seen before. Maybe they can figure something out and actually present something that Astralis hasn't seen at some point, that won't be able to read, that is going to put them in an uncomfortable situation that they don't know what's happening. So, it's not necessarily anything fancy. I just feel like teams are a lot of teams. We have these set ways, for instance, of taking, B on banana. There's a couple different ways to do it from the T side. You have the same thing with T mid on Mirage. And a lot of these teams are just kind of going through the motions of throwing these smokes and then kind of getting that same control that we've seen everyone get. But what do you do with it after that? Like, how do you change it up just a little bit to change the timing of the hit, to change where that smoke lands? Maybe you find a gap. Maybe you're able, remember Cloud9 just at the Boston Major had that super disgusting hit on middle where they were very, very fast paced with Terra coming up catwalk on Barrage, and he was able to have great success with it in the major. And that was something that we'd seen it happen before, but never with that same kind of success. And obviously Cloud9 looked at that and they were like, Tarek's great at this. Let's just keep running it like Novocaine. It's always going to work. So teams need to get back to that and start looking specifically at what their players and their skill sets can afford them to do.
Let's do this then. So we've done a pretty big sex shot on Astralis there, right? The next logical team is obviously Team Liquid. So this segment, sponsored by Zoloft, because unlike all the other teams we're going to talk about, even Mouse Sports, FaZe Clan, Na'Vi, Astralis, Team Liquid, one of these things is not like the others. One of them is not a champion. The funny thing is, I made this point because it's like a counterintuitive point that makes sense. Obviously, Team Liquid did win a tournament this year. They won the CS Summit, and that wasn't against joke teams. It was SK Gaming, it was Cloud9. But if anything, that sort of reinforces how much they've had problems in real stage finals, because that was just in a person's fucking house. Like, there was no massive crowd, you know. Of all the ways to win, if anything, what they've proven this year is, except for Astralis, they can beat all these teams. And if you put them in a, like, if they were in the old ESEA LAN, where it's just inside, like, you know, like a conference hall and there's no big crowd, I think they'd win fucking tournaments easily. I think this wouldn't be a problem. But you look now, it's getting depressing at this point in time. Because I was fine with them losing to Astralis. I thought, you know what, eventually you're going to get lucky and you're not going to face them. But this Mouse Sports one just killed my soul inside. Like, there was an element, listen, Mouse Sports are ballers. They definitely played some great Counter-Strike. But all of that wouldn't have mattered. The storyline would have been, wow, what a great game for Mouse Sports. Shame they lost. But at the very end, Liquid just fucking bent over and just handed them the trophy. Like, you take it. I am not worthy. It's like fucking Gandalf refusing to take the ring or whatever. Like, no, I cannot handle the power. It's like, you're a little cunt, aren't you? Right. What do you think then? Come on, Lynxx, step into the fray here. Team Liquid.
Okay, Team Liquid.
Speaking of teams with no flaws that you can't possibly pick apart, Team Liquid.
So, Team Liquid. Right. So I think the interesting thing about Team Liquid is if you look at the differences between them before the player break and after the player break. So before the player break, I personally criticised them a lot for playing very default. They played the same rounds so many times. I thought Nitro in particular was too passive, or he just sat still basically, and they just didn't give teams enough different looks. And I think E-League Premier's final went to show that, because Astralis read them like a book, and that's how they smashed them so hard in that final. But coming into the major, I remember actually watching their games during the group stages, and I was amazed how good they looked. I thought basically they'd obviously gone to the drawing board and added so much variation to both sides of the map. Nitro was playing so much more proactive, and that was really good to see, actually. And coming into that semi-final, I truly thought that was going to be the best match ever. I really thought Liquid to me looked so good coming into that semi-final, and it just fell totally flat.
I actually think that major run that they had, I think it was a little bit. I actually thought they looked like shit even in the quarterfinals. I'm not gonna lie. Well, not shit, but they didn't look great. Remember, they dropped a map, and I think when you look at their run and Astralis's run, Liquid came out swinging in the major, and they dominated the Challenger stage, dominated the Legend stage, and then they get to the playoffs. Astralis struggled in the Challenger stage, struggled in Stockholm, obviously, and then came into the Legend stage and picked up pace, and then they were just straight dominant once we got to playoffs. So I think that is the nature of the major as a tournament more so than any other event, that it's 3 weeks long, a month long, whatever it might be, where you really do have to find a way and notice how to peak at the right moment. And what we kind of had was Liquid peaking too early in the tournament, and then Astralis peaking at the perfect time. Now, I don't necessarily hold a lot of faith that Liquid would have been able, even if they were peaking, to be able to beat Astralis in a best-of-3 series, but certainly they would have played a closer series. They would have played much, much better. And, Liquid as a team at the moment, I think there's a lot of truth to the fact that you mentioned it earlier, that as an in-game leader, I don't think Nitro, I think he does a fine job calling. I don't think he has a great feel for the game throughout an entire map. I think what he calls is fine. I think when he calls it sometimes gets a little bit lost. I think they're one of those teams that also seems to have those just critical rounds that they lose for just like no reason, like having a dominant CTF and then they lose a round to like CZs and Deagle, and everyone suffers from that a little bit, but it always seems like that dagger hits Liquid at the worst possible times when they drop some of these rounds. So they have a lot of good pieces. I think there is a little bit of a choking factor. I think there's two questions that Liquid has to ask themselves going forward. It's one, how much are we really missing an experienced in-game leader? Although I guess at this point you would call Nitro an experienced in-game leader. How are you missing an in-game leader who's been that way throughout his career? And two, are you missing an AWPer? Are you missing those two pieces?
Unfortunately, it's the same person.
Yeah. Do you still believe that you can actually have success without those two pieces? Because those are the two obvious ones you identify where you just say this is a real makeshift situation between AWPer and in-game leader. So that's the question they need to figure out, I think, towards the end of this year.
Come on, dusT.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you look at the positives for Team Liquid, I think that they have a lot of the same strengths Astralis does in the sense that they are tactically pretty deep, but to go to Alan's point, it feels like even though you know what they're capable of, like you know their playbook's deep, like yeah, they can play slow-paced CS, they can play fast-paced CS, they seem to lean in one direction or the other and never really have the perfect balance throughout a tournament or throughout a game. And unlike Astralis, they try to be really flexible with their roles. Not everyone has like a set spot for every map or something like that. Like Twist and NAF are almost interchangeable. Like sometimes they're kind of entering with a lead, sometimes they're playing the edge of the map by themselves. And I don't know if that's a strength or a weakness. Like it's a strength in the sense that you can react better. Like if you get a pick on the edge of the map and you want to follow it up really quickly, you have a capable kind of aggressive rifler who can do it. And when you want to swarm and trade bomb sites, you have a bunch of guys who can, get in there with aggressive rifles and find entries. But when you're kind of setting up maybe like the deeper team play elements or, setting up your default more, if you're constantly have moving parts on it, then maybe that kind of kills the muscle memory a little bit or kills like the regimen or something that maybe affects your discipline a little bit. So that's kind of one thing I do think about. I think the opping point Moses made is an obvious one because out of all the top 10 teams in the world, Nitro's probably the weakest opper of those teams, like it's as far as like raw ability. But I will say he still does a decent enough job. And when he has a rifle, you can still be very impactful. He's still probably one of the best fragging game leaders in the world outside of like Glaive and maybe a couple of others. So he's definitely still has value in that department. But I mean, I think just to kind of add a little bit more to Moses' point about like Nitro being a good caller, but knowing when to call it, it's game management, right? And that was the biggest thing that got them in New York in that dusT 2 game was, they're up like 14-9 on their CT side on dusT 2 to win it, the series 3-1. And it's like they were playing not to lose. They were so timid. And I can understand to some degree you like wanting to save because you want to make sure you have your money right for the long game. I get that. But what happens is like there's one round I remember very vividly where they had a 4-on-3 retake opportunity on the B bomb site with utility, with Taco with B tunnels control as well. So it's not like you have to fight to get in the B tunnels and you have to waste extra time to get that and then kind of set up your split. No, they literally had everyone pretty much in position, but they didn't go for it because retaking B on dusT 2 is hard, I guess was their mentality. And I think also one of their players had already kind of started the bail towards long game, but they still had like 30 seconds left, so he could have came back and they could have went for it. Well, what happens here? So you didn't go for it because you're playing the long game, you have rounds to burn, okay, but you know what happens is like 3 rounds later, you're 14-12, you have to go for that exact same retake with one less player and less utility. So now you've put yourself in a situation where you have to play the game, you have to go for it now because the game's about to be over, but you have less to work with when you do. So again, it does come down to that factor a little bit of, playing not to lose instead of to win because you want to try to be safe, but you're being too safe. And now you set yourself up for, harder rounds later. And that definitely factored in. And you got to wonder what causes that. Is it the pressure? Is it the shot calling? Is it a combination of the two? Probably. Yes. But it's a different kind of choking, though. It's not the choking where you just make mistakes or, you lose to a force buy or something like that. It's literally like, no, you just are too timid.
You just wait for them to give you the game, basically, Whereas if you look at all the great teams, they tend to make the play that wins the fucking game. If someone does something,
when you try to go for the play, it's too late.
Well, if you look at it through that lens, look at who they've always kind of, or not always, but look who's been their biggest playmaker in recent months has been NAF, and he had an absolutely atrocious series in that final. So, you want to have a guy make a play for you. NAF was the one, as he said in that interview. I just got tired of losing, so I picked up an op, and that was from the major. And then now you go to New York, and where was he to be found in that final, which is tough. And I don't mean that to like criticize NAF. Everyone's going to have an off series. It's obviously super unfortunate that NAF had it in the finals. But that's still a series that they should have just closed out on dusT 2 or on that whatever the fourth map.
There's Mirage. dusT 2 was the one they were up. It would have been 3-1. Then Mirage obviously was the fifth one. No, the thing is, I think dusT actually. Your point there is like to elucidate it a little bit. Is a pretty key distinction, which is it looks like what Astralis does. Astralis, as Moses said, is the most efficient team. Like they're really good at knowing when to save, when not to waste your time going for like a risky retake or force buy scenario where it'll fuck your whole economy if you lose it. But the difference is Astralis is doing that for a positive reason. They know if we get another chance on CT side of this map and we have full utility because we saved, we're just going to win that round and that's how we'll win the game. We don't need to go for the risk. I think it's like you were saying. I think Team Liquid wasn't thinking that way. They were just thinking like, it's a bit risky. I don't know if we want to do this. And so like the difference is that they're not doing it from like a place of confidence where they have an actual plan. Right. They're doing it to not take any risks. And ultimately, if you never take any risks, you could still win a game, but it's going to be very fucking hard. Like your opponent sort of has to like give it to you in a way.
And then there was also instances where they just were non-committal either way. Like there were some rounds where you would think they were going to go for the retake in a 4-on-3, and they would kind of half-ass do it, and then they would stop. And then it's like, well, okay, now you've lost more resources and players thinking about going for it, and then you don't really go for it. And then the pressure starts to build. They started doing some gamble stacks, and on the site where there was one round where I think Nitro was alone at car, and Twist was like deep in long A doors, and 3 guys were on the B bomb site. Okay, cool. If they go B, you probably win the round. But if they go A, you're screwed because Twist and Nitro are isolated. They can't help each other, and your B rotation is so far away that you're never going to be able to go for the retake. And that happened late in the game as well. So it was a mixture of at first being too timid, then losing, then building pressure, then gamble stacking and making mistakes, and then like at that point the game's just like over. Even though I thought they recovered it in overtime. That's the sad part. Like I thought they had it. Like they got up 17-16. They actually had 2 rounds on their CT side, the side they were having issues on in regulation, and then they still somehow wound up losing their round to like this. I think Taco died in this weird Molotov at long A when they had a 5-on-4. And you're just like, wait, how did he die to that? And then the round just collapses, and you're like, well, here we go. Like it was just a comedy of errors from that point forward.
Classic Liquid.
Right, I've got a question for everyone here. So Moses alluded to it before, which is, as bizarre as it sounds for a team with such excellent general placings, you actually do have to wonder if a roster move is an option, if that's a potential solution. Now, I will say it as a caveat, because people might think this is hypocritical, because I've been one of the people who was actually very against Mousesport's particular roster move that they did. But the difference is, Mousesports as a team was in a position where, like, I actually don't think there was almost any roster move they could make based on the free agents I knew they could get that could make them better. Like they didn't really have a player who was going to take them to the next level. All they were doing was gambling that they might get worse or they might get very mildly better and wouldn't still be number one. The difference for Team Liquid is, like, they've proven in some senses that they're not going to win at the moment, despite how excellent they are. And as we've said, it's not like they're like Astralis, where every player in his role is super amazing. You know, like, they clearly do lack a veteran in-game leader who's won championships. They do lack dominant AWPer and some. So there's a lot of ways you could go on this. And as a result, I don't think it's like there's an obvious answer or a stupid answer. So Moses alluded to it before of what you might do. Alan, if you had to be like general manager of Liquid, or you're just planning in the future, you're looking at the trajectory, 3 months, 6 months down the line, is there a type of player or a role or something that you think would be the move to maybe get them over the hump?
So I'll answer 2 sides to this. I wouldn't make a change. I think in everything apart from, I think in group stage games, I think they are by far the second best team, actually. I think they are quite a lot better than Na'Vi, and I don't think the gap between them and Astralis is actually that big. So in that sense, I wouldn't make any changes. I'd just sort of try and ride it out, get more experience, and try and get over the hump that way. But if I had to make a change, it's probably going to be quite contentious. I'd probably take Elige out of this team, and I'd put in someone who's potentially more aggressive, more of a playmaker. Because in my eyes, this is when you're talking about Liquid being, I don't know, 4th to 8th best team in the world. Elige is definitely good enough in his position for what he brings to the team. But when you're talking about the top 2 or 3 teams in the world, I don't think Elige gets enough out of the spots he's given compared to the other top players that play the same roles as him. But in that sense, off the top of my head, I can't really think of who you could get, to be honest. But if for whatever reason, a Nico or something did present itself, I would take Elige out and put that sort of superstar player in that role. Because I think, as we've already alluded to, a lot of when they lose in these really high pressure games, I really do think it's because they get too passive and they don't be proactive enough. And that's where I thought Naf coming into the team really helped them, because when they first got Naf in, he would just do crazy stuff. He would just run through like a smoke or something and try and get some kills, or he'd play really aggressively. And I think more of that could help them, to be honest. So yeah, Elige out, getting a really good playmaking rotator and mid-round T-side player.
I don't know if I agree with that, because I feel like Elige is the only pure entry rifler they have. And I know that I need to be quick to clarify this, because people will be like, well, wait a second, like these other guys do entry work. Yeah, they do it sometimes. Like, they're very flexible on, like, sometimes Naf will be the guy entering, sometimes it will be Twist, but they're not pure entry riflers. They're not doing it round in and round out like the soldier that goes in first and is like willing to take that hit to do his job. And I think Elige is very much that soldier. Now, whether or not you want to critique him for not being aggressive enough or not being a playmaker enough, that's a fair enough criticism. But I think that he's the only one that really you can call like he's definitely an entry fragger. Whereas I think the other guys are kind of hybrids. And it's very map specific. Like certain maps, Twist will be kind of an entry.
I've even seen on some maps, like off the top of my head, I think it was maybe in the semi-finals when they were playing against Gambit. Like, actually, Nitro was basically like having an entry frag out the ass to make them work on that team. So again, it's like your in-game leader has to entry frag like that. Like, it's cool to see, but it's not an ideal scenario.
Yeah, I think they have a lot of aggressive prone riflers. I almost wonder. I think I agree with Alan. I don't think they need to make a move just yet because to me they've only like truly choked one final, the Mouse Sports in New York. The other losses to Astralis, I can kind of look past and kind of just see, okay, what happens the next time you get an opportunity where you don't have to play Astralis in the final? Can you do it? If it becomes like a chronic problem though, then obviously you have to think about it more. But let's say you do have to, like if you're forcing me that I have to say they need to make a move. I think the opping angle is one side, but I think the other side is adding a more like support clutch type player. Like Taco, is a support player, but I don't feel like he's super clutch. I feel like if you had like a more clutch late round type player, I think that would help.
If only there was this guy also from Brazil who might not want to play for his organization anymore.
That's a good point.
I can't think of any.
Calm the fuck.
Anyone on Twitter, just maybe ask like what about him? See if remind me who he is. I can't remember his name. Kenji or something. I don't know. Whatever. Keep going.
Are you done? That was it?
Yeah. No, I think that's it. Yeah.
Okay.
He just didn't want to name he who shall not be named because listen, that's had a hard time on Twitter. Give him a break. He's just going to be vague on that one.
I think with this Team Liquid team, I would probably give it to the next major. I think I think despite the failure in New York, despite the failure at the major to even like. The major, to me, for Team Liquid, even though they got top 4, is a failure, and not because they lost to Astralis, but because they got blown out in that semifinal. If they had had a close loss, I think that would have been great. I think that would have been fine that you were able, take a map and you lose a close map or something like that. But the fact that you just get blown out, that makes all the work you guys did seem a little bit rough. But for this team, even moving forward, if there is ever going to be a roster change, I look at this lineup and I say, you keep that core 3, you keep NAF, you keep Elige, and you keep Twist. Those are the 3 guys that are absolutely indispensable. You can't lose them. Obviously, Zeus stays as coach. And you look at Nitro and you look at Taco. I think, despite the fact that they don't, I'm a little bit different on my idea of this whole role system. I don't give a shit that there's not some pure entry fragger on the team because they're one of the few teams who largely plays their T sides with 5 AKs. They don't necessarily they don't need an AWP. So when you have that many AK-47s, whether if it's fast paced, it's going to be spawn based 2 entries. Whether it's a tactic or an execute, you have a lot of points coming in at similar times. So you don't necessarily need that one person like Apex who's always going to be the first person just trying to help you get that control. So I think you look at that after the major and you just you have to assess the weaknesses there. But I think Nitro and Taco are the only 2 places you can look. I think if you're going to give up Twist, Elige, or NAF, it's going to have to be for someone banging, because you're not only losing a solid player and a really, really talented player, you're giving a potential rival, an opponent, an incredible player as well. And there's not even if they were to have Nico available, I'm not even necessarily entirely sure that's some kind of a massive fucking upgrade for a Team Liquid in the place of a Twist or in a NAF. Obviously, they don't have the accolades. Obviously, Nico has a lot more championships, but I don't think it's going to bring them to such a massive new level that would make it worth it. So you look at Nitro, and I think you have to say, listen, Nitro, you have to pick one or the other. Do you want to be an opper or do you want to be an in-game leader? Because we have to fill the other role with something. That other person has to come in consistently. They need to have an opper, not necessarily that plays like Device, but you need to have someone who's experienced, who's going to be able to use it on both sides of the map, because at the moment, Nitro can't just go mid with an op and get you a pick the way a Device can, the way a Simple can, the way a Guardian can. So they need something eventually, especially if the next major run doesn't pan out, because this has been a cool experiment to watch. But at some point, remember, this team has been top 3 in the world probably the majority of 2018, and they have 1 trophy at a summit to show for it. That's not good enough.
It's the saddest thing that there probably are the best North American lineup of all time, but don't have that trophy that a Cloud9 has or that an Optic has, which is crazy to think of. I mean, I think this team's. I think this is the best NA team we've ever had in CS:GO.
Oh, easily. By far.
I think it's hard to make the case against them, especially because so many of those teams were dark horse teams, and then they got the one big win. Whereas this team, it's the opposite story, isn't it? It's they're consistently there in a way no one ever was. It just, unfortunately, they don't have the championship to dismiss that angle.
It's incredible, though, how much they just, for whatever reason, are just literally Astralis in every way. Not only in how they play the game, but the story. Well, no, not even that, but like the history story as well. Like, how long did this Astralis core, like, those players are so young, and they failed so many times, and they were very, very good at dominating group stages, not good once you got to the playoffs, choke games away, lose championships, maybe pick up one or two trophies here or there, but they struggled so much for years, and now they figured it out. And if this Liquid core stays in the same direction, it's going to be so funny to see it, because that can just remain a parallel for the entirety of Counter-Strike for the next years, because Liquid's super young as well, super experienced. But I mean, even Astralis and Liquid are both super young teams, and it's incredible. They have such long futures. If they can figure it out, they're going to be a dangerous squad for years to come.
It's hard to smash it because they have so much upside. Like, of all the other teams in the world outside of Astralis, I think they're tactically the best as far as like how deep their playbook is, and they have a lot of talent. And like, it's hard to build that somewhere else. Like, if you blow the team up and like make moves and you lose some of that, then you lose that ground you do have gained over pretty much the rest of the national scene. It's literally a composure issue, and like maybe lacking an opera that other teams have. So it's like, it's so hard to consider making a move when I feel like they already have such a great foundation.
The funny thing is, considering obviously with all like the depth they've got, the tactical element, the placings, they are unlike every other NA team in history. But the one area I think that's a negative is normally the story with a lot of the NA star players in history was like they were all super cocky and they all like thought in their own brain they were as good as like the Olaf Meisters and Kenny S's. This is the only team I've ever seen where they've got the skill to do that and they don't think that. Like most of the players in their team, it kills me. I can't handle interviews with Elige on stage. Stop interviewing this guy. Like literally, you could ask him like, so Elige, you're going up in this 1v1 versus Thorin's grandma, who actually doesn't have use of her arms. Are you going to win it? And he'll go, well, we'll see. I'll do my best. It's like, oh, this is for fucking real. I'm like, come on. Come on. You must believe you're going to win sometimes.
And then the social media after they lose is so bad too. Like Twist, like when I read a Twist tweet after a tournament, it's just like, man, like you can't be that. He has. I will give you that. Like he was much worse like late last year, early this year compared to now. But yeah, that just goes back to the mentality thing though, and the composure thing though, like how hard they take things. I don't know.
I mean, if you, this major seemed like the first time in the group stages when they did Astralis that BO1, that felt like the first time that they actually thought they were actually able to beat Astralis. And yeah, it's just a BO1, but like all the other finals they've been in where they've actually taken a map here or there, they never actually thought that they were going to win. And that's why that's what made that prospect of Team Liquid making a run and potentially winning the major such an enticing and romantic, thing to get behind, is because you could actually see it in the way they carried themselves. You can actually see it in some of the interviews. They do have the worst fucking interviews. Even the ones where like you could start to see they're getting a little bit confident, a little bit braggy. They're just like, yeah, we're really going to take it to Astralis. We're going to show them what's up. And it's like,
oh no, dude, this is what they said for the final. They said to Elige, they were like, Elige, so you're going to be playing mouse spots in the final. Then like I can't remember what the interviewer said, but I'll just make up what the question could have been. Like, they're a team that hasn't been in the greatest form recently. You guys are coming off one of the top teams. The crowd here is going to be cheering for you. They're expecting you to win. Is there anything you'd like to say to mouse spots? And he goes, yeah, watch out. It's like, fuck it, get me out of here. Get me the fuck out. That is not banter, mate. That is not some sick... Like, if that was like a fucking UFC promo, they'd go like, right, take two, do that again, with a bit more feeling. Like, believe that you're going to win. Like, is this for real?
Yeah, Jesus Christ.
Yeah, watch out. Tell you what, I'll see you. If you don't see me... No, wait, the other way around. It's like, so, what sort of mad fucking attempted shit talk is that? It's so garbage, isn't it?
They need some shit talking training, don't they?
I know. They need fucking Happy Gilmore to come in. Piece of shit like you for breakfast. What, you piece of shit for breakfast? No, that's not right. Exactly. Maybe that's the movie they need to watch. Exactly. That's also, I actually feel like one bizarre element. So one person we haven't mentioned is Zeus, right? And this might sound weird because normally in a sport, if a team can't get over the hump and they're always in the same position making the same mistakes, it would be very easy to say, just fire the coach and get a new coach. But I actually think the problem they have in terms of Zeus is culturally, he is coming from a scene where everyone's the opposite. Everyone's like way too fucking hyphy. They're like all fucking super aggressive, like arguing with each other, and he's trying to calm motherfuckers down. Then he gets to Liquid, he's like, brilliant, they're all just calmed down. And then they're all like, ha, Zeus, do you think we'll win this final? He's like, are you for fucking... Get FNX in here. Get him in here like FNX. Like, I am the greatest player who ever played. Well, you were pretty good. He's going, I mean now. It's like, sound, well, got the other end of the equation deal with there.
Yeah, but it's amazing how many teams have that issue. Remember, Chris J's always said that about mouse sports. Like I remember in Belo Horizonte when he kind of gave an interview and he's like, sometimes I have to remind our guys that it's okay to be excited and happy when we're winning games. Like you can.
The way you say that, like he's just going, be excited, be excited.
He's looking down and he's got, a Finn and an Estonian and they're just, just chilling and like not even reacting to anything. And it's like, guys.
He's just passing little notes down the line. And then when they like Rops opens it, just like smile. That never happens. Like some shit like that. All the old tricks.
It is so absolutely mental that there are a lot of teams with that kind of an issue. It's craziness. My dream for Counter-Strike, my dream for this whole scene, it's going to be my New Year's Eve, like it's going to be my wish for 2019, is that Astralis just starts talking so much shit. I hope they just start shitting on absolutely everybody. I hope they just start telling everyone they suck, that their teams are dog shit. I hope they tell all the players that they're just going to fucking wreck them at every single game. And then they just go into 2019 and just spend the first 4 months just dominating everyone.
You mean like Glaive comes out and he's like, the only thing wider than our map pool is going to be your anus after this game. It's like some like outrageous banter. Because the problem with their team, obviously, is actually, in a weird way, Moses, that is actually a factor. Because think about it, right? They're too respectful as well. Like even Astralis wins and they're like, well, it was a good game, they tried well. It's like you actually want the Fnatic shit where like Flash is just like, haha, looking at all his like major trophies in the warm-up and you just like, everyone looks at him and they're just like, I hate that little cunt. I want to beat him. I want to beat that little guy.
We don't have a villain anymore. That Fnatic lineup was so epic. It's like, hey, what happened in this match? It's like, oh, well, we were about to lose. You were down like 12-13. We took a timeout, and then I was just like, you know what? We're Fnatic. We're probably going to win this game. And then they just go and win it. And it's like that kind of shit. And it's that kind of swagger. And like Fnatic, obviously, eventually you're going to lose a step. And I think that's what scares everyone away. Is eventually that doesn't work, as Conor McGregor found this weekend. Eventually that kind of goes
topical
away.
Reference.
Config got fucking
McGregor.
Config got tweeted to death, and it's just like shit like that, where like you need a team to be the bad guy a little bit to kind of make this exciting and everything like that. And at the moment, the only team who has the swagger and who has the ability to back up that kind of smack talk is Astralis.
Oh, I thought you were going to say like another team who could do it. Okay.
No,
it's true. No one else can.
The
problem is no one can talk shit to them. Put it out way. That's a part of the problem as well, isn't it?
Exactly. But they're the ones who could get up in like a pregame and like, are you worried about this at all? And they're just like, no, we've beat them. The last 10 times we faced them, they haven't even gotten double digits on us, and we just don't think they're good enough to take us in a map. And it doesn't have to be any kind of like harsh shit. It doesn't even have to be any actual shit talking. Just tell the truth, because you're dominating everyone.
Yes.
Just don't.
The problem I have with that though is, Moses, I know why you framed it well. It's just your wish, you just hope it happens, because that is somewhat of an unreasonable demand to make of Astralis. So guys, anyway, you win in every tournament, incredibly dominant. You've got all the map pool, and you beat every team in the world. They're all intimidated just by your level of play. Yeah, it's good, isn't it? It's like, could you possibly talk shit about them and really like rev them up and that? But why would I do it? We're winning all the games. Yeah, but we want other people to win. But I just want to win. Yeah, but Team Liquid, I really like them. Can they win once? No? Oh, right, okay. Thank you. Understandable. Have a nice day.
Or someone, like even if it's not against, obviously you're not going to shit talk against Astralis, but someone have a matchup where you just say, we're actually going to shit on these guys.
That's why the obvious example that was a bit hype was when Naf made that comment. It wasn't even pure shit talk. If you actually looked at the context, it wasn't as sexy as the quote. But when they beat Astralis, he just said that quote where he was like, Simple wasn't really a standout player for me. I don't think he's like that. I think he's a bit overrated or something. And then Simple was like, I will practice 7,000 hours a day to kill you. It's like, and obviously they never played again after that, which just cock-blocked the whole... Like, I thought they were going to be in the final in New York, would sell that storyline. And of course, they just cock-blocked the whole tournament, didn't they?
I made a bet with Valda at E-League last year that Cloud9 would beat North in a series on LAN, like the next series that they played, and they haven't played each other since we made that bet. And it's the dumbest fucking thing in the way to call it off.
And since then, there's about like 4 players shared between the teams that are even in the line. It's both worthless bet ever now.
It's just so ridiculous how some of these stories that pop up like that just don't ever come to fruition. That Simple one would have been great. I think it could still work in the next event or two, but it's losing its. But yeah, we need someone with some fucking attitude to get up there on the stage with these interviews. I don't know what to do about it.
What about this then?
Astralis did do it once, actually. I can't remember what tournament it was.
I know the one you're referring to.
They were going to play Virtus Pro.
It was in 2015 at the PGL Season 1 finals where...
They would have bought some lube or something and said, this is for Virtus Pro.
That was pretty good.
Opposite our hotel, there was a sex shop, and they went and bought some lube and just said, like, Well, this is also why trash talk doesn't work for a bunch of like fucking Danish nerds. Because rather than just go like, you might need this once I'm finished with you or something, they were like, you're going to need the lubrication before. It's like, fucking hell. Like, it was the most like matter of fact way. Like, you're going to need lubrication after our metaphorical intercourse with you inside of the gate. Not real, of course. We are polite. We respect women. Like, it's like, sound. This is the shittest shit talk ever. Like, it's garbage.
Duncan, that's the crazy thing. Is it these Astralis core actually has some of the best like smack talk and like just BM. Like, remember the timeout they did on Fnatic at MLG?
Yes, that was carried unfortunately though.
That's the most epic thing ever. But they,
that was baller.
Let's do it. Let's get back to that.
Here's the sad thing. I'll leak this to you now because time's passed already. You know, like the sell-by date, the NDA on this one's not a problem anymore. That I'll tell you right now. You don't know how many times like me and Carrigan have planned out like when we beat SK, we're going to play this map. They're not going to expect it when you beat them. This is what this is what you say, okay, and this is what we're going to do afterwards. And obviously they just never did it, did they? Until like at that point, it didn't matter anymore to beat SK because they weren't even good. So it's like that moment just never came. There were so many times where it's like the plan was sucking sick. It was going to be so epic. And of course, like fucking Cold Zero, so which closed the game out. Like, well, that was a waste of everyone's fucking time. Like, what about this then? So we've alluded to them already. mousesports is obviously the team that beat Team Liquid. Let's talk about them now. Let's like skip ahead a little bit. dusT, I want to know, what do you think of mousesports?
I mean, I think that they still have some upsides. I just think the problem is that some of their upsides are starting to slip. You know, like Rops, for instance, has really been falling off individually since Snacks joined the team. And some of it, I think, is because he did give up some of his CT spots to Snacks. He also, there's something that coincides with each other is the fact that on Mirage, this team was super dominant on Mirage early in the year. They were like 17-3 in their first 20 games or something like that. They were insane. And since then, they have like a pretty abysmal record on Mirage overall. And one of the big things that happened is that like on Mirage, their key map, you know, Rops has to change his T-side role. They look a lot sloppier. They're not as decisive on following up picks. They just looked sloppy, at least when I'm talking about the major, right? Obviously, at New York, they looked really good. They wound up winning the tournament. But when you looked at the major where they really flopped, right, they came in dead last place, which was low even for what we thought they would do, even with the issues they were having. You know, you see little things like that happening, and you wonder, you know, what the heck's going on. I do think that as they've shown in New York and as they've shown at like E-League, Premier Leagues, other events where they've been able to get top 4 finishes, like they're still a dangerous team. Like I think Sunny is probably number 2 behind Dupree for entry rifling. If you're just thinking of pure entry riflers, I think that's a huge piece for them. I think Chris J is still a pretty good fragging and game leader, though obviously not as big of a tactician as some of these other teams that are out there. And, you know, I think they just made a mistake, you know, like with their roster. I can understand why they thought they needed the cut sticko because they constantly are losing to like Astralis or FaZe, and it's like, man, if we just had like a little bit more firepower, maybe we could do it. Sure. But they just picked the wrong person. Like if you were gonna go get more firepower, then actually go get more firepower. Like don't get Snacks when he's already like not in form anymore. Like go get someone who actually is gonna add a little bit to the firepower, and then you start to hear when later on that. Well, apparently Sticko was like calling for everybody when he was dead. And so the communication for the team overall wasn't good enough, which is already bad enough when you're on international alignment, everyone's speaking their second language, yes. And then communicate. So it's like, man, like you really just feel like they're starting to get a little bit lost. Granted, again, New York, they wound up winning it. So I feel like maybe it's poor timing on my part to mention these things, but sure. When you just think about the team overall, it just feels like they're letting some of their mat slip in their mat pool. Rops is starting to slip as a player. They just don't seem as cohesive. Because the one thing you could say about mousesports is even if they played like simpler, aggressive Counter-Strike, at least it was decisive. At least everyone's on the same page. And at least they, you know, would go for it. Like they could follow up really well. And now it feels like there's some hesitation. There's some like, you know, people just kind of doing things at the wrong time or just not together quite the same way they used to be. Like it's just not as cohesive is the best way to put it. And that means that you're not going to be as sharp. You're not going to as many games if you are making like these little small timing errors, or, you know, people are thinking one thing when they should be doing the other. Things like that are obviously going to cause you to not be as good.
Okay. Jump in, anyone?
So I think a lot of people, they look at kind of how mousesports is now compared to early in the year. They look at the move, the literal move of Stico to Snacks. But in my opinion, I actually think the main difference in this team between that then and now is actually an Oscar. So I think when they went and played at Bello with nothing instead of Oscar, and then obviously Chris had an incredible tournament, it was basically just turned loose. If I had to guess, I think they kind of got it in their heads. They thought, they kind of opened their eyes that why don't we just have Chris as our main AWPer? And then
I believe the rumour in the scene actually was that they actually offered Nothing a spot. I think that was actually a rumour.
And it wouldn't surprise me. But and then from then on, they changed some spots, and on some maps, mainly on CT's side, Oscar isn't even the main AWPer, it's Chris J.
Yes, Nuke, for example.
And I think they do it now on Mirage as well. I think they put Oscar on short every round now and have Chris main AWP. But it just baffles me because it just like, why have Oscar? Why have Oscar? Why not just have Chris main AWP, bring in a rotator? And so it just doesn't make any sense to me. And I don't think it's any coincidence that there's been rumours about other players coming in for Oscar into this team. They're looking into other players. So,
but then the problem was the rumor was going to be VeXii. So are you really going to pull the same thing again where like, yeah, you need a player, but you just don't get the one that makes any sense, like for the current form or what you need as a team? Like this is like their roster moves have been some of the weirdest I've seen, and like a really
maybe it's like a long-term con though. You know, like the long con is because they want to eventually get like out of these problems with all the language barriers and like the team play. They're gonna just like recruit Neo next, and then later on in the year maybe pick up Pasha, and then eventually see if like Taz wants to come back or anything. So at that point in time, yeah, the dream team, right? Brilliant, yeah.
Oh, there's not enough pot in this world to make someone pick up Yali onto that team. Sorry, I've been reading up. There was a massive update to Counter-Strike.
Yeah, I saw that as well.
Problem is we can't address that now because we're gonna have to like think about it, etc. So
yeah,
that's true.
So I'm gonna sit this one out because I didn't get to watch any of New York, and I haven't been watching Star Series at all this week. I've been taking a break, so I actually haven't seen Mouse Sports play. Okay. I don't know what or anything has changed, so I'll just reserve judgment until I get to see them next time. Yeah, so I agree with all of you.
What I would say on this topic is, like, to tie into what dusT mentioned about the whole thing that came out in the interview about Sticko, that's exactly the point I made every time I brought up this exact move of Sticko out and Snazore in. I never, ever once said Sticko was a better, like, individual player than Snazore, even though I think Snazore is actually somewhat washed up. I've never said Snazore is going to be a worse player, but the problem is people just didn't know any of the intangibles Sticko brought to the team, and I actually knew some of these things from talking to him and other members of the squad. So, for example, one of the other reasons I actually think is sort of like a meta-related reason as to why Astralis is so ahead is because look at the teams out there who are the closest to Astralis. Na'Vi and Team Liquid. Okay, so Team Liquid has one player who isn't like native English speaker, but generally you're talking about teams with the same core language, the same core culture, and they've all, that's the same, they have that shared quality with Astralis. Then you go to the FaZe clans, the Mouse Sports, etc. These are the mixed teams. Now, mixed teams were working great when we didn't have this dominant squad, but if you've already got disadvantages against Astralis, and they have basically almost perfect comms, you're going to have another big disadvantage that doesn't show up in the server. Like, no one's going to see from your crosshair that you didn't get the right comm or you weren't on the same page. And so I actually think Sticko was acting as like a mad band-aid to the team in that sense, that when everyone died, because by the way, he has some of the best English of everyone in that team, and obviously had a great mentality for it. So he was like sort of patching up their comms basically and making it work. And so they looked like a cohesive team when they had that old Mouse Spots lineup. Whereas you bring Snazore in, it's nothing to do with Snazore. Like, it's not like he is not doing that or whatever. It's like now you've got all these players who they literally have nothing in common. They all should be like the star player of some other team in a totally separate country. They're all put together. They're all trying to, like, you're hoping they can all do their job separately, but there's not that much link up. And that's one of the things I find so whack. They actually remind me in this one sense of when Zeus left Gambit. Because if you remember, Gambit didn't instantly nosedive. They had like still a bunch of tournaments where they were like dangerous. Some of the players were good, but they immediately went from like a team that was really, really cohesive to a team that was like, these are just the players on paper. Like what you see on paper is what you will see in the game. If Adren wins a clutch, you can win a round. If Hobbit gets these kills, you can get that. If Moore has a good op, you can do. But there was no there wasn't that factor of like greater than the sum of their parts that the SKs of the world had and the Astralis of the world had. They didn't have that factor. And so the problem I see with them as a team is not only do I not see how they build that, because I don't think they've got like the mentality in a lot of the players, but even worse, if they hadn't have won New York, these are roster rumors aren't like just like, some teams there's a rumor where it's like, maybe one player's upset with someone or maybe someone had a chance to join. These are moves where it would literally have happened. Like Oscar would already be out of this team by now. But that delays it a bit longer when you win an event.
I was going to say, do you think that winning New York has just delayed their stay in hell?
They just bought them like 3 months more, basically,
But then that puts him in major time. And remember, they have to go.
Exactly.
Remember, they have to go through the minors, and they don't get a direct invite. They have to do an even longer system now.
Absolutely. And good old Snacks is like, bloody hell, I'm back at the old online qualifiers. He thought he dodged that when he left Virtus Pro, didn't he? He thought, glad I got out of that fucking hell. Who would want to go through an online qualifier? I hate online Counter-Strike. Right, Snacks, we start the online qualifier for the EU man. Whoa, bloody hell. Sound.
Oh, what a fucking nightmare that is. They got wrecked by that change.
What about this then? Let's just talk. I think the last big team to talk about is obviously FaZe Clan, because even though results certainly have fallen off and they're not a team that has most recently looked like winning tournaments, with the pedigree of the players and with the different combinations of who they have in their lineup, it still feels like it should be possible to win or do big things. So Moses, come on then. This is a team you definitely know intimately. What do you think about FaZe Clan and where they're at in the world where all of Mice is fully back? We're not in any of that standing bullshit. Who is the FaZe Clan of today, as it were?
I actually don't like FaZe Clan a whole lot as a team at the moment. And you'll remember this. I was one of the people who were like most resistant to FaZe becoming one of like the best team in the world when this lineup really kind of formed at the start. And I think they still kind of suffer from a lot of the issues. This is still a team, obviously, that we've been saying for a year, focused so much on individuals. It's a very loose style. It's closer to a Swedish style where you have a lot of different players on different parts of the map ready to take advantage of an opening that their teammate provides. And at the moment, none of it really seems to be clicking. And now they switch with Nico into the in-game leadership, which we saw him do in Mouse Sports, and he was decent at it, all things considered. I think there's a couple issues. I think Rain is kind of a step down from where he was earlier at the start of this FaZe team. I think Guardians lost a big step with the AWP. I'm not even sure I would put him in the top 5 offers in the world anymore. I think that's kind of a frightening prospect for FaZe where he's such a big part. And also, by the way, he's not an upper necessarily known. He's got a decent rifle, but he's not known to be able to just transfer between the weapons as well as some, maybe someone like Simple, obviously, which is kind of an unfair comparison. But regardless, he's not as fluent in kind of transferring over to a rifle. So I think at the moment you have Olaf and Nico who are both playing. Very
Moses,
well.
actually, that point you just made there is not a small one, because in the current climate, even the people who are primary AWPers and they're the best AWPers,
you have to be
Simple, Device, Oscar, they also have a fucking wicked rifle. It's like that's the mad advantage you get in those teams. You can't just say, well, get the utility off Astralis and then they're done, because the star player doesn't have an AWP. That doesn't matter. That might just give you a different look that works as well.
Yeah, so I mean that's a big thing that they're going to have to deal with. The question always going to be, I'm not even going to really talk to it because it's so obvious, is the Kerrigan thing. If he's not going to be in-game leader, and can he actually be useful on this team? Does he have a part to play? So they've got a lot of questions, and it feels like they're almost they're spending a lot of time trying to make things work that just feels like it's not going to. I think this team is in some real trouble. I don't necessarily think that they can claw themselves back. Let's put it this way. I have more faith in MIBR being able to claw back up to like a top 3 spot than I do for FaZe at the moment. I think this team's in for a pretty rough ride in the near future leading up to this next major. And I think they're going to have to decide at some point in the next month if they want to make a change for the next major.
I mean, I feel like they have to, right? I mean, this is what blows my mind is how bad their T sides are for a team with this much talent.
It's disgusting, and it's annoying to watch.
Dude, there has been so many instances this year alone where the team does well enough on CT to win the game, and then they get 5 or less T rounds when they really need it. And it's not like it's against Astralis. This is happening to them against Big at Cologne, against fucking Virtus Pro at V4. Like, how do you not manage to get a good T-side with your talent against Virtus Pro at an offline event? Even, like Mouse Sports, a team that's supposed to be like the mini version of you, like have a similar play style, have some talent, but not as much as you have, yet they can't pull off T-sides against this team either at like Stockholm and E-League Premier. It's just happened so many times. It happened at the major as well. That's why it was a little bit harder on them to get through the group stages, because they were flopping against Big and G2 and stuff on some of these T-sides. And when you're playing a looser style of Counter-Strike and your T-sides aren't going well, the in-game leader has to come under fire. For as much as we want to praise Kerrigan for how he manages personalities and find roles for people and kind of gets a foundation, at least like, hey, at least we kind of know what spots we're going to play, and I'm going to make sure that you're doing this and you're doing this, and we're going to kind of have this approach. Like the whole T-side shot calling is a big problem to me, just that they don't get more out of it with the talent that they have. And their map pool is just slipping on all fronts. Like some of their big maps that you would know them for, like you think of like a Mirage or a Cache or some of these maps that they used to be really good on. They have like massive losing streaks on some of these maps now within like their last 5 to 6 games.
And they also
is
thought,
the only
by the way,
exception.
They were one of the teams that hoped dusT 2 was their savior, and that is absolutely not their savior. That's like some fucking Bane shit. Like, there's betrayed you. It's like that is not the map you want to be going into, boys.
Yeah. And then I'll disagree with Moses about the rain thing. Like, that's definitely been a huge hit to the team this year compared to last year.
Yeah, that which was a shame because I thought Rain last year and it was really, really good. I thought he was like one of those like dark horse, like, you know, I don't think he was close to being the best player in the world, but I think he could have been in that conversation at the very least, which would have been, I think, an honor enough if he's even being, you know, in that talk. But I think the big thing is, as you said with their T sides, when I watch a FaZe T side, I'm just like, all you guys are doing is waiting for someone to make a mistake. You're just hoping someone's going to like make a mistake and walk into your crosshair and win a duel, and it's very basic stuff. And obviously that's an issue when you switch an in-game leader at the beginning, like in the middle of a tournament, is you obviously can't go too complex. And obviously it is automatically going to make things more basic because the in-game the new guy doesn't have the same experience and the same, you know, he's not used to having to micromanage a team on that scale. So it's just an awkward scenario all around with FaZe, and I think I'm actually kind of worried for that team.
You know, the funny thing about that is, though, that is basically another example of how your strength, if it's not good enough, becomes your limiting factor. Because what made FaZe, when they broke out with the Olaf Guardian lineup, seemingly impossible to play, was like, because they had, like, every player was amazing. It's like, right, well, first of all we have to do on T-side is just bait out some smokes and flashes, then just go in with AKs, and now you've got Nico taking an aim duel with someone. If you kill him, fucking Olaf Meister's coming in after him, then Guardian's coming in with an AWP. Whoever you kill, you've got a clutch scenario where Nico or Rain or Guardian or Olaf, some of the greatest clutch players of all time, are taking the clutch scenario, and then on CT side, skill-based side of the game, you just bang everyone's head off from default spots. Like, it seemed like the perfect way to play the game because, again, it's pick your poison. There's no, like, you know, when Nico was in mouse spots, and there was literally times where if you're playing cash, you're like, right, Nico's playing near mid a lot, let's just fucking go to A all the time. Like, there's no option like that against FaZe Clan. But the problem is, now that doesn't work, they still do it. And now it's just a nightmare.
Yeah. I honestly, I hate to say this, but I think I don't. He's talked about it in the past that he was kind of he was getting closer in his mind to be ready to step away from the game a little bit. I think some point in the next year, but at some point in 2019, it feels like Guardian's got to make that decision. Like I don't know. I hate saying that someone like him should get changed, and I don't necessarily think that, but I think he's at that point now where it is kind of like now you have to put more of yourself into the game to get back to that level that we know you're at, and back to the level that made you a critical piece of this FaZe team. And if not, then it's time to move on to something. But they've got to figure that out, because I think Guardian, and obviously Guardian is probably the second biggest problem they have. The first one is going to be Kerrigan and the leadership change at this point. But you know, they got Guardian situation has to get figured out. In my mind.
I don't think I agree. Actually, I don't think they have really any individual problems on this team. So when I interviewed Rain back at the major, he talked about how during the stand-in period without Olaf Meister, they literally didn't practice at all. Like, they basically played a few games to sort out who was in what spot, and that was it. They just went into the tournament. So you're looking at what, like 4 months or something? I can't remember the exact length, but it's probably about that period where they barely even practiced at all.
Yeah, but let's not use that as a defense of the way that they practice and prepare. Let's use that as a criticism of the way that they approach the game, right?
Yeah,
like,
true.
Fucking hell.
True, but I think since Olaf came back, that they just look really out of practice. They just make so many small mistakes where if you just flash that angle off, that AWP is not going to get that opportunity to pick you. And it's almost surprised me how little they've actually improved since Olaf has come back. And I don't know what it is, whether it's a mentality problem, whether it's like practice ethic or something like that. But
imagine if I told you that, okay, I have this team called Mouse Sports. They have a less reputable in-game leader than Kerrigan. They have arguably a little bit less talent when you think of guys like Nico, Guardian as an opper, these different guys, and some of the shortcomings that some of the guys over Mouse Sports have. All that, I've told you all that. Oh, guess what? Mouse Sports T-sides are better.
Yeah, I mean, that doesn't surprise me necessarily at all, because again, I mean, listen, that whole FaZe thing about them not practicing while Olaf was a stand-in, that was like a known trait of this FaZe team, is that even when they were, you know, winning, they didn't like to practice. They were one of the teams to like step into the match server and use that as a practice.
That's the key thing. Was I don't know if they've ever actually admitted it in interviews, but I know that they were a team where legit their mentality was like, that's why we go to every tournament, because like we're not the team that like we don't want to do what Astralis does, where we take like a month off, do loads of demos. Instead, we go to every tournament, and it's match play that keeps us in form.
Yeah, I just don't think that works in this era of the game. There's just too many holes in it. We're talking mainly about their T side here. But there's just too many holes in it, and when you've got teams that are so good at playing really dynamic CT sides and actually look at how they play, I mean, they basically default the same way every round, from what I can tell, basically. And,
Yeah, go on. Sorry.
Well, yeah, you can go. I wasn't really going to say anything.
Oh, I was just going to say, you brought up a really good point. Is after I had my little mini rant about Guardian, I think the one thing I didn't mention there is because you said they don't have any problems with individual skill. They obviously are just playing like shit as a team, and sometimes that's the change that's needed. Sometimes if you change the way that the team is going to play, an individual all of a sudden can kind of catch up, and maybe that change comes with Nico as an in-game leader that'll kind of snap some of these players back into place. It's going to be just a very weird time for this team. I had another point, I just forgot it. So dusT, take it away. Back to you in the studio.
Sure, I'll give you a few seconds. I just think that I have seen FaZe have the capacity to do some cool executes with some cool utility usage and stuff like that. It just doesn't come often enough, it doesn't feel like. Or it just, I don't know, like it just feels like they lack that depth to their T side, which you would think, okay, you have all these good players, you shouldn't have to have that. You should be able to make it work with just talent alone. But then that doesn't even work. Like the team play seems a little bit broken up. And I can understand that during some of the stand-in periods. I mean, maybe the chemistry is obviously off. You don't have Olaf. And I could give you some for that. But even since Olaf's return, the dude's playing really well individually, given how how much time off he had. Yet you still arguably performing worse than you did when you had stand-ins.
Of course, yeah. No, what they need to do then is fix the phase capacitator, which is obviously shaped like an F sign, and then need to set their phases to stun the world of Counter-Strike. Anyway, enough of the filth for you then, Moses.
Yeah, I got my point. I said this during the major, and I'll bring it up here now because there's a little bit more time when I'm not casting a game to be able to go in depth on it if need be and have a conversation. I actually have, if I think about it, I actually have Olaf Meister as the best player in CSGO history. If you just isolate Global Offensive, I think Olaf is my pick for the best player that we've seen, because I've watched him do everything. I've watched him. Remember, there was that era in Fnatic where he was the guy where they just said, "Oh, we need to win this round. If we want a chance at winning this game, we have to win this round. Olaf, go kill people," and he would get you a double kill. We've seen him in those dueling positions. We've seen him clutch. We've seen him use the op. He's been the secondary opper. He's been the primary opper at times. He's done phenomenal in that position. And now he's moved on to another team, and he's been very, very effective. He reads the game, I think, as good, if not better, than anyone. Probably definitely better than 99% of the pro community.
By the way, that's the reason why, if you've noticed in interviews, Nico was always bigging up Olaf, and he was always saying stuff like, "No, we don't need to take Croman," because put it this way, within that team, even though to us they're all like alpha dogs or whatever, Nico is the alpha of all alphas. He's the one that they all look at and say like, you are our star player. But Nico himself thinks that like Olaf is the best teammate, because to him, like, he sees all the intangibles, all the way he helps like create an entry, the way he'll play like a spot so you can play like, to him, Olaf's the guy he loves.
Yeah, and for good reason. Like, Olaf just has such a good sense of when to make his move, or when to make the play, or what to do to give his teammate an opening. And that's one of those things you can't necessarily. That's not an easy thing to teach someone as a new player. Now, oddly enough, where the fuck is Croman? Like, what if he comes back now? What if he takes Kerrigan's spot and they have Nico as the in-game leader? How the fuck did Croman not play himself into a position on another team? Why has no one picked him up since then? That's kind of confusing. But to stick with the Olaf thing, I just think he's actually incredible. When you look at what he's done, he's gone from being kind of the star go-to player. Remember, he was like maybe the third option for Fnatic in kind of their heyday, and then towards the end of it, he became their number one, their primary option. Now you bring him over to FaZe, and he's a phenomenal player at a team. And I just don't see anyone with the kind of the pedigree. He's got everything. He's got the medals. He's got the MVP. He was the best player in the world through 1 or 2 years. Like, I don't see anyone who's put together a better body of work throughout Global Offensive.
I'm not sure I agree that he's definitely incredibly versatile. I think I'd put other people above him in terms of like overall level over time and stuff. But I want to get your guys' thoughts on, like, if I had to criticize FaZe, I'd actually criticize like the management and actually the coaching of this team. I'd criticize the people over the team that make the decisions about how they practice, how they kind of the overall philosophy to how not the small things, like the overall philosophy to how they play, how they practice, how they prepare for teams. So in my eyes, that's somewhere where the FaZe organization themselves need to actually step in maybe it involves a coach change, I don't know, or maybe it involves more management staff behind them, but they actually need to change. Something's obviously not happening behind
this
the scenes.
aligns with like actually my perspective on FaZe, which is I agree with you on paper, Alan. Like in theory, every player can do their job and is really good, but they clearly don't work together particularly well. Now that didn't matter because again, what I think was genius about this lineup when it was first made is it played right into the strengths of Carrigan and his favourite way to play Counter-Strike, which is you just get, basically, he reminds me of like an old school basketball coach where what you do is when you find the mismatch in the defense and your offense and you get one player who can like beat the other one-on-one or in a certain play, and you just run that play over and over until they stop it. And if they can't stop it, you just win the game. And you basically say, like, listen, I found an edge in the game. And if you think about the way Carrigan's T-sides are, it always starts with a basic default. You go into similar positions. And then if he has, like, Rain's going into this connector area or Mirage over and over again, if he has Nico's going short with Ulfman, he just runs that over and over again. If he can't stop it, then he's just going to win the game. And his CT sides, because he had so much skill, they're going to be there all day long. So it's actually a very reliable way to win the game back then and before people pick up on it. But if I look at the team now, like, first of all, I wouldn't change the style entirely. Like, you can't be like Astralis with this lineup. But I do think one mistake Carrigan probably made is, I think the reason he kept Robban as a coach is because he didn't want someone, like, stepping on his toes tactically. He was like, right, Robban, you stay in your corner, mate. You, like, manage the players as a person, and you're, like, their big brother or whatever. And I do all the tactical shit, because that's my game, you know. That's what I do. I think he should, by now, I can't believe he waited this long until they kicked him, basically, from being in-game leader. He should have brought someone else in that had a slightly different mentality for the game, just to give him a different set of eyes, like the equivalent of the secondary caller angle, the guy you can go to in the timeout, and he can tell you, right, you know, you're doing this too much, like it's not working, they've got to read for that, or you've got to, oh, here's what I noticed when I was watching the game because you're playing it, you know, maybe do this adjustment, because that's the thing with FaZe Clan, their adjustments when they're on these T-sides are fucking ass. Like if they're just doing badly, we've all seen the way the major went when it was Cloud9 in the final, they had no adjustment, they were just praying that the same thing worked, and I think they really were using the same logic Oz's fans were using, which is like, well, if you're at 15 rounds, surely Nico's going to get like a double and open a site, or, you know, Guardian. And that mentality sounds great as outside of the server, but if everyone's thinking that, including the people in the fucking game, it's not a great scenario to have. So first of all, I think they should have considered that. And then secondly, the other angle is, my biggest problem with them as a team is exactly that angle. Like, everyone is really good in theory, but collectively, I don't think they're that great. So I've always said this, ever since they stopped winning, my dream move in FaZe was never bring in Simple, bring in Cold Zero. I think that's more of the same, and you're just hoping you go back to the old FaZe strengths. My move was always the less is more. Like, I wanted them to take out whoever it might be, pick Rain and put in NBK. I wanted them to go that sort of route where you're bringing in a guy whose whole job's going to be, I'm here to facilitate people, I'm here to do some of the nitty gritty between the in-game leader and the stars, and hopefully at that point in time, we're not as like one-dimensional, because they were the best at that being one-dimensional. They had a mad fucking, it's like having the biggest gun and you can only fire like one style, like, but they didn't have any versatility, them as a squad. So bear in mind, that's not even that good anymore. What's the point in running the same experiment again and again?
I think the problem, I mean, to address kind of your question, Alan, is if you're going to criticize the FaZe organization for how they manage this roster and this team, I think you have to criticize pretty much 90% of the organizations in Counter-Strike, because I think still to this point, there's still too many players, too many
Basically,
teams.
as far as I know, Moses, it would be everyone except Astralis and North. They're the only teams I know of that actually like have like a general manager type dude, a coach who actually decides the roster, you know, like practices determined by them.
I think Liquid's like that as well. I think there's probably a few more teams that are like that, but I mean, for the most part, yeah, it is just pretty much the players, like, you know, the inmates running the asylum. It is, they get to decide when to practice, they get to decide this kind of stuff, they get to decide roster changes, which has always been a little bit crazy. That'll change over time. But I mean, speaking more directly about FaZe, I think the problem, I mean, one of their biggest problems, that I know we kind of moved on from talking directly about them, but I think the game has just kind of passed them up in the sense that they have so many star players, right? But the era of having like one star player or two star players who can carry you, I think is pretty much over. We had about 3 years of that where you watched Get Right and Forest, where you watched guys like NBK and Kenny, where you watched guys like even Olaf and JW and Flush all had their different turns, and Fnatic and everything like that. I think now the new star player is going to be, Simple is still doing it to a degree with Electronic, but that's kind of a special circumstance.
He's the outlier, obviously.
Yeah. But I think most star players that you need to start seeing and basing yourself around are the Coldzera's, who is a star player within a style of play and with the framework of a team, is the Device, who is the star player and an incredible talent within the way that they play the game. And I think that's the kind of star player that we're going to be seeing more and more moving into the future, versus the guys like Olaf versus, the old Olaf. And versus
if you want to contrast it, Moses, how about this? If you look at people like Olaf Meister, Kenny S, Shocks, these are the guys where their role as star player is like, give me room, I do what I want, and that's how we win. What I see like you're heading towards here is like Device is every coach's wet dream, because he's doing all that shit within exactly what you want him to do in the game. Coldzera, obviously you build your whole team around what he's doing, and it's all already helping out in any way, closing out rounds. So I'm kind of with you on that in a way.
Yeah.
Any thoughts from the peanut gallery?
Yeah, I think the problem is like the more and more we talk about it, a lot of the moves that FaZe could have made, I feel like are gone now. Like if you wanted to get an MBK, he's kind of gone now. And I don't know that there's an obvious in-game leader you pick up if Nico being your in-game leader isn't the long-term solution.
Isn't that the most shocking part about this? Is like, come on, like this is the part I don't. If I sat them down, every member of FaZe, including Nico and the coach and the management, I did a polygraph test. And they weren't like Dr. Ford, who prepared to fake polygraph test. Straight fire reference there, politics. But anyway, it's probably an old story at this point in time. But anyway, if I sat them down and I asked them two questions. One, do you really think long-term Carrigan will be a support player and remain in this team? And two, do you really think Nico will long-term be your in-game leader and from now on will be just known as an in-game leader? I'm betting nearly all of them fail that. I think the only one who would pass the test is I think Nico actually might be delusional enough that he would pass it. Like everyone else would fail. Like, they might say it, they might want it to be true, but to me, that's a perfect example of a move where you are just delaying the inevitable. And the inevitable is, there's no point having Carrigan if he's not an in-game leader, and then there's no point having Nico as your in-game leader because he's, first of all, your best player, and he's just not going to do it long-term. It's not his bag. Like, it worked. If you'd done it for one event, like at the Major, if you were like, right, it's our only chance to win the Major, I'll give you that. It's not a long-term solution, though, so why delay it? Why not start now trying to get the in-game leader you want, or the support, pick what you got to do in that sense.
I think go on.
The problem I have with like this kind of topic of like who would they get or who should be calling is for them to actually change to a more structured in-game leader or whatever, they'd have to totally change their philosophy on how the game is actually played. And I don't think that's going to happen until they lose horrifically. I think if you look at a team like G2 now, I think it took them having such dismal results with that previous lineup to actually say, this is not working. We need to actually rethink our entire philosophy. And I don't think FaZe are at that point yet.
The problem is Nico might fuck around and actually carry a game, and then they go, yeah, we're all right, yeah, no problem.
The players are so good that it does work. The one in 3 tournaments, they might just win it because they are just such good players.
The problem is, I think that G2 lineup that eventually they played so bad they had to make a change. Everyone else saw them playing like dog shit for about 3 months before they realized it. And then now I think the same thing. I feel like, and it hasn't happened yet, but I feel like the same thing's going to happen with FaZe, which is kind of scary. Even away from any specific player being removed or roster changes, it is, because there's always going to be that question, like when you said, Elige get replaced from Team Liquid, is you can only do that if you have someone, or, Zeus, Duncan, you mentioned Zeus getting replaced as a coach. Like, even if you don't have faith in Zeus as a coach, he's still better than any other option you're going to bring in. At some point with these teams, if you're going to make these roster changes, we're going to have to start seeing a lot of teams pretty soon starting to go young, starting to go for the untested players. Yeah. And I mean, look at all the talent that we've had come up in that direction. Twist was a huge gamble. Automatic was a huge gamble. Stewie was a huge gamble. Rops was a huge gamble. Sonny was a pretty decent gamble. We saw a little bit more out of him than most of the others. But I mean, all these young players that are stars that are so good now that we talk so positively about, I think there's too much resistance at teams from the top to hang on to the legacy and the old term players. And I know that's kind of been an old storyline and an old thing that a lot of people have jumped on about, politics in the scene with all these players getting recycled, and have always been pretty resistant to it. But in this day and age now, with these buyouts and everything, and I think the nature of Counter-Strike changing the way it has, I think you do go young, because it's going to be hard if you're an in-game leader on a team like FaZe or even a team like MIBR, is especially with FaZe. Let's say someone like, let's say Kerrigan says, hey, like, let's play this round this way. And then Nico or Rain or Guardian says, oh, no, I've always been like the big dick of the team. Like, I'm going to do this. This is the play I want to make to get the opening kill. And then all of a sudden Kerrigan's like, yep, well, fuck me. I guess my option's kind of out the window. So I think you have to bring in young players who are going to, be a little bit of the bitch for a while, but like learn how to play the game, but they're going to listen to you. They're going to have that respect. And I think going young at this point isn't a bad option in any way.
The problem with that is, though, this. Like, first of all, I agree with the premise. That's the reason why I even said I'm in a tough scenario, because I do agree that I even said this way back when they lost, I think maybe when they lost the IM final to Fnatic. I even said I already thought this specific 5-man lineup had run its course. It was time to make changes. Like, I've seen the best of it, I've seen the worst of it. It's not going to go back up to the top again, mainly because the circumstances of the scene have changed. It's not even about you necessarily. But the worst thing about it is, on paper, I'm a big fan of Carrigan, but I do think like it's time for him to move on. Like, once you've lost the respect of the players, you don't get it back, unfortunately. Like, it's very unlikely to make that.
He's already
turn.
been through that once before.
Exactly. Yeah. So he needs to do what he did before, go elsewhere, obviously, which will have to be a step down, I'm afraid, because that's just the nature of where he is. Do the same thing. Build up a team, build up his style, get players. So it's fine for him to leave. It's also fine that FaZe probably needs a different game leader. The problem is there is no obvious option. Right. So I'll give you a good example. People memed after MSL got cut from North. Like, what if he went to FaZe? Again, he's going to corral superstar players. He's going to play with his style, which is the polar opposite of FaZe, and make that, it's not a move. So the problem is this. This is the real qualm I've run in the scenes in Moses, which is, if you look at all the big in-game leaders that fans would list that they love, they are all really old school players. Most of them are actually from previous games, like 1.6 and Source. There are very few fresh in-game leaders from the last few years that are in top teams. Yeah. And so the big issue is this happens in every game, and the same thing happens like we're seeing right now, which is everyone's resistant to it because no one wants to be the first person to get a young in-game leader, like funnily enough Fnatic did with Golden, and then it works a bit, but then it doesn't work as well as like the legendary guy, or he doesn't have everything about his game. Maybe he's got a system, but you just can't control the star players. Maybe he's got some aspects, but then people read him and he's not as good long term. And the big problem is this. Everyone knows we have to bring through a new generation of in-game leaders, but no one wants to be the ones who initially are making the mistakes and getting the shit ones while we figure out who are the good ones. It's the same thing I've seen happen with coaching and everything, because what happens is no one wants to be the first guy to get a coach because he's going to be terrible if no one's coached before. But we all know we all need coaches so that one day there's a market of coaches and you can just buy the best guy. So I agree with you. I think that's probably the gamble if you were FaZe, because obviously, like we're saying, you don't remove the star players, but you've got to do something different with them. But I couldn't name you a person. I couldn't make you a short list of 5 people that haven't been a top in-game leader who you could put in this team. Because the problem is, none of the established people work either. Like, you're not getting fucking God B and putting him in FaZe. I'll tell you the one move, you want an out of left field move that wouldn't be that ridiculous. The only... No, it's better than that. Right, obviously Glaive's not leaving, so that's all out of the table, The only one I could see that would be worth a shot if he really wanted to do it, okay, is... in truly two-faced fashion, Fallen goes, what called Zera? You were going to join Team Liquid. Nah, fam. I'm joining FaZe Clan. And then he goes, because he's the one person I could see that has the respect of them. He has some fragging abilities, so he can also get respect that way. And maybe, I've seen him do a lot with the star players, maybe he could give it a crack. But even then, like, that's a mad out of left field move. Mate, and also, to be fair, if he leaves the MIBR brand, even I'm going to be on board. Like, I only joke about it, but I will actually start a campaign like #FuckFall. Like that's outrageous if you make a brand called They Made in Brazil and you just fucking leave immediately. Like,
I was going to say, you think you have issues going to Brazil. If Fallen were to leave him,
I know, yeah.
Face, he'd never be going home ever again.
Exactly.
I mean, this is kind of going to be a way broader comment on that, but I mean, especially when it comes to in-game leaders, that whole point you just made to me is more of an indictment of the system that we have set up in Counter-Strike of how you come up as a player versus
Of course.
Versus there not being any in-game leaders. Because remember, we like the in-game leaders who people all know and love, when they came up, all these old school guys, they came up because they had to make a team and actually work their way up the ranks of a ladder. And you learn how to be an in-game leader when you're at ESEA Open, ESEA Main, ESEA Premier. And each step of the rung, you learn a different lesson, whether it's, how to run a default, how to run a specific strategy, how to use a certain kind of player. You're learning something as you go up. And then once you get to the professional level, you still have a little bit more to learn, but at least you've got some kind of a base. Now with more players, and I mean, this is, I hesitate to use the word cancer, but one of the things that we have created for ourselves with
that's a title right there. If it wasn't for the fact I know it would get demonetized if I put cancer in the title, that's 100% a no context title right there. I hesitate to use the word cancer, but
but when you have a system of finding new players that is all FPL and Rank S and these kinds of systems that are pug systems, you're never going to find the in-game leader. You're never going to. And how many teams, when was the last time you saw a team actually rise to the ranks to be able to do some kind of a damage against a tier 1 team, whether it's at an event or online? When is the last time you just saw a player of 5 people who worked their way up from like ESEA main through 2 divisions, got into the pro league and didn't get immediately rejected didn't get immediately relegated after 1 season? It just doesn't happen. And it's especially more difficult in Europe. So how are you ever going to find an in-game leader? If everyone's got to have huge stats to get into FPL, how are you ever going to get there? How is an in-game leader ever going to be the one that someone notices? So there needs to be a different way. There needs to be a different reward system of in-game leaders, or there needs to be a bigger focus on taking players from teams that are groomed growing up, coming up through the league and actually rising up and showing that an in-game leader can actually put together a squad that can be competitive. Because that's the only way you can actually make an in-game leader get any credit, is by seeing he took 4 guys we'd never heard of before from ESEA Open all the way to ESEA Pro League and had an even record and kept them in Pro League for 2 seasons. Let's give this guy a shot. That's the only way it's going to happen. And we don't know. No one has that emphasis anymore on that specific role.
This video was kindly supported by Andreas, Snazore, Westerlund, Dean Tanglis, Gardner Wilson, Landon Thompson, NateDOhDoubleG, Kyla Harris, Travis Greb, James Harding, Daniel Yordanov, VeXii, Robert Baxter, and a special thanks goes out as always to Jerky's Minion. Do you want to suggest a topic or a guest for my content? Would you like to ask me a question in my monthly AMA? Would you fancy a few teasers for what's coming up in my content? How about taking part in an esports discussion with me? We'll put your money where your mouth is and join the Scrilluminati today at the Patreon link in the description box below.